great morning to all. Today, we mark this date as an event where we redefine our opportunity. But before we proceed our program, let us all sing the Philippine National Anthem, followed by the opening prayer.
Kayang magiliw, telas ng sinakalan, alam ng puso, sa dikit mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa mandulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa dagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong pagaw, ay hinatang tula, kawin sa pagkayang minamahal, ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nag-iindig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang ay di magtitingin. Luman ang araw ng walhagit pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang hindi kaya na pagkay mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Good morning, everybody. I am Michael Valera, your host for today. Welcome to Philippine Startup Week 2021. This year's theme is Beyond Recovery, Filipino Startups Redefining Opportunity. Philippine Startup Week 2021 has been organized by the Department of Information and Communications Technology, the Department of Science and Technology, the Department of Trade and Industry, and QBO Innovation Hub. This week-long conference was created for startups, scale-ups, entrepreneurs, investors, tech enthusiasts, and the general public. We'd like to welcome each and every one of you to this event. As this is our first day, I'd like to invite you to tune into our first main summit, the opening ceremony. It is my pleasure to host this event and join you over the next 5 days as we showcase the top Filipino startups and innovations and discover what a better future looks like with a thriving startup ecosystem. To open our Philippine Startup Week 2021, I'm very privileged to introduce to you the Acting Secretary of the Department of Information and Communications Technology, the Honorable Jose Arturo de Castro, the Secretary of the Department of Science and Technology, Honorable Fortunato de la Peña, the Secretary of the Department of Trade and Industry, Honorable Ramon Lopez, and the President of Idea Space Foundation and QBO Innovation Hub, Mr. Rene Meili, for their welcome remarks. Let's kick things off with Secretary Mon Lopez of the Department of Trade and Industry. Let us welcome Secretary Lopez with a virtual round of applause.
The theme of this year's Philippine Startup Week 2021 is Beyond Recovery, Filipino Startups Redefining Opportunity. And all this revolves around the perennial question, what's next? What's next for the Philippine startup ecosystem? The Philippines has been named the startup ecosystem to watch in Southeast Asia. But what exactly has been going on within the local community, particularly in the past year? While we note that the pandemic has greatly affected our industries and enterprises across all sectors, particularly our micro, small, and medium enterprises, in 2020 through the first half of 2021, we have nevertheless seen how our startups, driven by the impressive level of innovation of our talented entrepreneurs and the need to innovate and adapt, have risen to the occasion and revolutionized the way business is done amidst the challenges, limitations, and restrictions on movement brought about by the pandemic. The impressive level at which our startups and businesses innovate, adjust their business models, and create new products, services, and solutions are apparent, particularly in critical sectors such as the healthcare, e-commerce, fintech, logistics, and digitalization of business processes, ensure that our industries and economy thrive and survive. Our startups and innovative companies also play the critical role in developing and helping traditional businesses continue to do business by offering their groundbreaking solutions and services. Take fintech, for example, which remains one of the Philippines' brightest prospects in the world of innovation. The contribution of fintech companies in addressing financial inclusion and serving the unbanked and underbanked population has been very significant. During the pandemic, for instance, e-wallet became the platform for the Philippines to do transactions and for the government to disperse cash assistance. In addition, we have just recently witnessed our first ever unicorn, the Mint, having been able to raise $300 million in the recent funding, bringing its total valuation for its GCash e-wallet business to over $2 billion. Also, we now have 6 fully licensed digital banks and at least 12 mobile e-wallets, which together are empowering consumer activity and ensuring that market transactions and exchanges continue despite the many roadblocks and challenges of the past year and a half. Likewise, the Philippines e-commerce sector, composed by many of our startup companies alongside established enterprises, is anticipated to register record numbers in 2025, with gross merchandise value expected to reach $15 billion. The number of internet users in the country grew to approximately 79.7 million people in 2020, or around 80 million, accounting for more than 3/4 of the country's total population. The Philippines' 5.2 hours also recorded the highest spike among Southeast Asian countries in terms of the average hours spent online per day, and mainly for personal use. The other day, according to E-Economy Southeast Asia report, our country is now the fastest growing internet economy in Southeast Asia, with the Philippines registering 93% growth rate from 2020 to 2021, while the whole Southeast Asian internet economies are showing double-digit growth. The forecast growth of transactions for the Philippines is from $9 billion to $17 billion, reaching $40 billion by 2025. We have also yielded 12 million new e-commerce users during the pandemic, the highest proportion of new users in the region. Thanks to the government's efforts in dramatically improving connectivity and the digital infrastructure of the country, and the numerous programs that empower thousands of MSMEs into digitalization and e-commerce platforms. All these certainly expanded their market reach that allowed them not only to survive, but thrive and even prosper during the pandemic. This reaffirms our commitment to facilitating the digitalization of our MSMEs and fostering the growth of our startups, because these too would become strategic partners towards an innovative and resilient post-crisis future. Digitalization is the future. Not only will it optimize productivity, but it can also expand the reach of businesses further and garner new opportunities for all Filipino business owners. Leveraging on the country's strengths, that's fintech and e-commerce, we will be continuously working on policies and programs that would encourage startups to keep coming up with products and revolutionary solutions as our MSMEs continue to innovate and digitize their operations and business strategies. DTI is working with strategic partners in helping organize B2B and business matching activities that will connect startups with our MSMEs as a way of optimizing available market opportunities for startups while helping MSMEs innovate their business models and go-to-market strategies. We have likewise continued in the work on supporting our startups' market expansion and growth through participation in local and international exhibitions and startup events. We hope that with more investors interested in the Philippine startup ecosystem, DTI can help inject more capital into local startups to help them grow and scale their operations, expanding their reach and tapping into the sectors that need them most. This week, I'm happy to announce that we will be launching the Philippine Startup Venture Fund with 250 million for 2021 and 250 million pesos for 2022, precisely to make this aspiration a reality. This will help bring in the much-needed capital accessibility to these innovative startup companies. In closing, it is my pleasure to invite you all to join us and the rest of the Philippine Startup and Innovation ecosystem for the entire Philippine Startup Week ahead. Beyond recovery, join us in redefining opportunity. Thank you and mabuhay.
Thank you, Secretary Lopez, for those encouraging remarks. Next to welcome us is Secretary Fortunato de la Peña of the Department of Science and Technology. Let us welcome to the virtual stage and give a round of applause to Secretary de la Peña.
Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. I'm so happy to see you again at this third Philippine Startup Week, the country's largest gathering of startups and startup enablers to showcase how the Filipino startup community is redefining opportunity beyond recovery. We invite you to participate as much as you can in the different events organized by the government and the private sector throughout this week-long conference. At last year's Philippine Startup Week, the DOST launched the Startup Grant Fund program with the theme Jumpstarting the Economy in the New Normal. The program was created as a response to the demand for quick and innovative solutions that could reinvigorate the economy. A year after its launch, we are happy to announce that 22 startups have been approved by the Department of Science and Technology for funding under the Startup Grant Fund program. We recognize that the potential for inclusive recovery, even far beyond the post-pandemic era, lies in the spirit of the Filipino people, in the unwavering tenacity of each and every individual who has dared to dream big and has come up with bold solutions that can help the country. Even before the Innovative Startup Act was signed into law, the DOST has already supported the local startup ecosystem by establishing funding mechanisms, infrastructures, and facilities for startups and startup enablers. With the signing of the Innovative Startup Act, we are renewing our commitment to support the startup community, especially during these tough times. We will continue to fund more startups for their research and development activities so they can translate their prototypes into market-ready products that can benefit the Filipino people. We have also opened a funding opportunity for women-led social enterprises so they can better support their communities and create societal impact. We will be establishing new technology business incubators in locations that have no TBIs yet so that startups in those areas will be nurtured to increase their potential for success. And lastly, we will strengthen the startup ecosystem in the regions through our DOST regional offices and our DOST TBIs so that our startups outside Manila can also become globally competitive and that the Philippines will improve its ranking at the Global Startup Ecosystem Index. You will hear and witness more details of these opportunities as we launch our new programs during this Philippine Startup Week, which officially opens today. All these programs are promulgated with a keen focus on developing the talents of individuals, entrepreneurs, game changers, so that they can in turn envision and create a brighter future for the Philippines. Again, welcome to the Philippine Startup Week 2021. May we all have a productive and fruitful week ahead. Maraming salamat at mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Thank you so much, Secretary De La Peña, for the motivating remarks for our viewers today. Also, to welcome us all, we have USEC Jose Arturo de Castro of the Department of Information and Communications Technology. Let us give USEC de Castro a virtual round of applause.
Science and Technology Secretary Fortunato de la Peña, Trade and Industry Secretary Ramon Lopez, Mr. Rene Butch-Miley of QBO Innovation Hub. Good morning, everyone. I am Undersecretary Jose Arturo de Castro of your DICT. And on behalf of my co-presenters and partners, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for attending today's opening ceremonies. As we are all aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has adversely affected the nation, its economy, as well as the lives and livelihoods of our people. The public and private sectors, our businesses, and even our schools and universities face the immense challenge of ensuring their continuity as we are forced to adapt to the health crisis and to keep up with the great shift to what we now call as the new normal. As part of the whole of government efforts, your DICT continues to focus heavily on rolling out connectivity and digital transformation throughout the country, those being vital to effectively addressing the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. Your DICT is currently intensifying its efforts to build up the nation's digital infrastructure. This we do directly under the government's National Broadband Program and the Free Wi-Fi for All program, as well as doing our part in the various government initiatives such as the Common Tower Policy, the multi-agency joint memorandum circulars to ease the permitting processes for business applications as well as for ICT infrastructure, the Cloud First Policy, and our President Duterte's policy for inclusive access to satellite services. That's just to name a few. These are all, of course, intended to foster and encourage the private sector and the various stakeholders of the ICT and ICT-enabled industries to invest, engage, collaborate, and mutually cooperate in order to provide the infrastructure needed for a more solid foundation for the digital economy. The National Broadband Program entered its Phase 1 deployment last December 2020 as a way forward towards the establishment of a government-owned broadband network and for a more reliable broadband connection. As for the Free Wi-Fi for All program, your DICT under President Duterte's administration has worked tirelessly to increase its rollout rate by 500% during the pandemic. providing more and more public places and COVID response facilities with internet connectivity for our people. In addition to connectivity, your DICT likewise realizes the need to nurture Filipino talent, creativity, skill, and ingenuity in the areas of ICT and ICT-enabled services, because we see the potentials of our Filipino entrepreneurs to be vital agents of significant change and positive disruption in terms of digitally transforming and improving our various social and economic activities. With that, your DICT commits to create an enabling and thriving startup environment for our young Filipino entrepreneurs. And to achieve this goal, we are of course guided by Republic Act number 11337, or the Innovative Startup Act. Your DICT continues to work with the various partners and stakeholders to help the local startup ecosystem thrive amidst the new normal. With connectivity providing the foundation, your DICT will be pursuing further initiatives to empower, enable, and provide more opportunities to the Philippine startup community by providing them with capacity building, key resources, sandboxes, as well as more avenues to engage and collaborate with other agencies, partners, potential investors, and other stakeholders in the startup ecosystem. We eagerly look forward to seeing what the participants of the DICT Startup Challenge have in store for us this year. The winning teams will receive equity-free grants, equipments, cloud credits, and of course, the most coveted mentorship hours from notable industry leaders. Under our President Rodrigo Roa Duterte's administration and guidance, your DICT continues to strive for the creation of digital highways for our startup communities to do their trade, to network with clients, and connect with the customers and the larger communities in the Philippines and across the world. We also share the vision of our former Secretary and Senator Gregorio Gringo Onasan to make the opportunities of the digital economy as widely available as possible to all Filipinos. We also echo Senator Christopher Lawrence Bongo's call for a more conducive and digitally transformed regulatory environment for businesses under his proposed e-Governance Act. All this, of course, with the aim of fostering every Filipino entrepreneur's potential to be a trailblazer, an agent of change. Again, maraming salamat po. Thank you, and all the more power to the Filipino startup community.
Thank you very much, Yusek De Castro, for your inspiring words. And lastly, to give his welcome remarks, we have Mr. Butch Maley of the Ideascape Foundation QBO Innovation Hub. Let us welcome Mr. Maley with a round of applause to our virtual stage.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Butch Maley, the president of QBO Innovation Hub and Ideaspace Foundation. Philippine Startup Week is one of the major events that allow us to bring the startup ecosystem to the public and to potential partners and customers. At QBO, we are always working to bring the tech startup ecosystem to more Filipinos. We organize regular public events like the Kulitan and Basics. This year, we've also partnered with 10 movers within the tech startup ecosystem for the Community Advocate Program. This allowed us to expand our work to more communities and support the work of community leaders nurturing ecosystems around the country. In the past few years, we have seen the Philippine startup ecosystem give birth to new ideas, new businesses, and new leaders. This would not be possible without collaboration. The Department of Trade and Industry, the Department of Science and Technology, and the Department of Information and Communication Technology have played important roles in advocating for startups in the country. And we are excited to learn how they will expand their support for startups. We hope to see this same commitment to the development of startups from more government agencies. In many ways, the pandemic presented a unique opportunity for startups to showcase the widespread applications of their creative solutions. Today, QBO remains in the business of empowering future leaders of the startup ecosystem. With boot camps, incubation, and acceleration programs, and even seed funding, we hope to support more founders as they pursue their dreams and scale their startups. We also hope to encourage more government and corporate collaborations with startups. And we hope that this week's conference can be an avenue for these partnerships. We've seen that a community that encourages, supports, and empowers each other can create success for more Filipinos. This is the spirit that fuels our ecosystem, and one we hope that people will embrace this entire week. As you explore the Philippine startup ecosystem over the next few days, I hope that you will be inspired to become a change maker within your community. Who knows? One of you joining us here today may have the next great idea that will send waves of change across the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Meili. Again, thank you to our speakers for taking the time to speak with us today, and welcome everyone to this exciting conference. To get you even more excited about this year's conference, we've interviewed founders and enablers across the ecosystem who shared their thoughts about where the Philippine startup scene is headed. Let's all watch this video.
The Philippines is one of the top 100 startup ecosystems in the world. At the heart of Southeast Asia, home to 27 tech unicorns, with 15 new unicorns in 2021 alone, where startup businesses are set to reach $1 trillion valuation in less than 5 years. The Philippines is a new frontier for digitization, with 65 million internet users strong. The local digital economy will grow to $28 billion by 2025, fueled by fintech, e-commerce, B2B, and edtech, and other emerging sectors, agriculture and food, digital media, IoT, and 5G. It's time to discover the next wave of innovators. Learn from the experts, engage with investors, connect with other entrepreneurs at 50+ community activities, and be part of the Philippines emerging startup scene. Join the country's largest startup conference, Philippine Startup Week 2021, a 5-day virtual event happening on November 15 to 19, 2021. Are you ready to grow beyond recovery? To officially open the event, please welcome your host, Katrina Rosa Chan.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Philippine Startup Week 2021. I'm Kat Chan, Executive Director of QBO Innovation Hub. As one of the organizers that has pioneered the country's largest startup conference, I'm proud to mark this day as another landmark moment, not only for us, but also the founders, enablers, investors, and our entire startup community that comes together for this celebration. This will be the biggest startup week yet, and we're beyond excited that we get to share this moment with all of you. Behind every successful startup is a story of passion and collective vision. For its third year and with the theme Beyond Recovery,
Filipino Startups Redefining Opportunity.
Philippine Startup Week recognizes the potential of Filipino startups in developing businesses that can cater to the needs of our nation and create solutions for the world. This year's 5-day virtual conference was made possible through the partnership between the Department of Information and Communications Technology, the Department of Science and Technology, the Department of Trade and Industry, and of course, QBO Innovation Hub, as well as the over 50 community partners that came together to highlight the various sectors and entities contributing to the burgeoning Philippine startup ecosystem. As we continue to push the boundaries, we encourage you to continue to focus on solutions and innovations and to be a community that comes together to help our country. Every small drop counts. One small ripple can lead to a big wave. Change starts with you. Hard work and passion drive a business to its full potential, and their success stories become an inspiration for others to aim for the same goal. Join me as we welcome startup founders and enablers, Pam Mejia, Karen Lacadin, Dennis Velasco, and Dr. Luis Sison as they share their views on the role of startups in the recovery and growth of the economy.
I believe that we should be optimistic because there's really nothing like the Filipino talent. Iba talaga ang galing ng Pinoy, and I feel like even through the toughest and most difficult times, even in business, we know how to pivot our business models, and we know how to be more creative in finding solutions to the problems that we face.
Support is here. We have stakeholders, we have enablers like us who are tirelessly working hard to be able to really create a collaborative community. And the startup ecosystem has grown big and reached far. And it's very, very exciting, especially for the youth.
You know, if I just take a look at some of the other folks that we really work with together as other founders and trying to build the ecosystem, I'd say those that have really gotten past their change or pivot to adapt to what's happening around them, I would say, you know, the significant majority of them are really starting to rapidly accelerate and scale their business.
I believe that startups and the whole startup ecosystem will act as catalyst of change and innovation. What I notice is that whenever there's a problem, whether in the society, usually the entrepreneurs are the first to solve it, or the first to innovate a product or a service or a solution that will really provide to that problem.
Innovation does resolve a lot of things, especially societal problems, especially the grassroots level of approach. And definitely it will become the bridge for economic growth, especially for the countryside.
So if you just look at other regions and other economies, it's no secret that the adoption of technology can make a significant impact on their economy. So things like the knowledge and workforce base. 85% of occupations in the technology industry make a lot more money than other industries and occupations. So the more people that we have that are successful in their financial success, that is more economic power for our local region, right? And then second, when the startup ecosystem starts to really build our own tech ecosystem of service providers here locally, not only does that financial success stay within our economy, but the economy becomes a lot more resilient because technology has proven everywhere since the beginning of mankind, to improve processes, improve the way businesses can operate, and actually help businesses.
My startup, Fibers, which stands for Fashion Inclusive Businesses for the Environment, Information, and Sustainability equity. What we do is support these entrepreneurs in scaling and growing their enterprises. And I really believe that sabi nga nila, ang laban ay nasa baba. And you really need to be involved in things like this para makita mo yung change and for you to really innovate the whole startup ecosystem.
In my own venture, I really believe that providing value first is a business approach that works because, when you provide value first, you don't need to do any hard selling because you are already helping your community. More people should be involved because there's still it's still growing. It's a work in progress, and together we can definitely build a collaborative community where competition is healthy and collaboration is really the core of all the enterprises.
We're trying to make e-commerce software accessible for every Philippine MSME, and for those of you out there that may have a traditional business or thinking about a new business, let's face it, right? 70% of all the consumers out there are shopping online straight from their device, from the comfort of their home, right? And that's a huge, huge opportunity for such an enterprising culture as the Philippines. And so when we start to, really enable and empower, merchants and MSMEs, to have their own online presence, to be able to accept payments and ship their products and services anywhere, not just in the Philippines, but around the world, it really opens up the entire world of business, to our country, right? So I think that's going to be really exciting. While it was exciting, to me, it seemed like, technology's already fixed everything in the U.S. And, I'm really blessed with that opportunity to come to the Philippines. And because to me, this is the world of opportunity. I mean, you can walk around and in 10 steps, find something that technology can improve and fix. So from an entrepreneur standpoint, if I can do it, as long as you've got the purpose and the willpower to break through any barriers that stand in front of you, I think it's a great time for entrepreneurs to get into the Philippine startup ecosystem.
The pandemic has created new challenges and opportunities in e-commerce, education, and health, among other areas, which startups can address and grow their businesses on. For example, Zoom saw its revenue grow to $2.6 billion in January this year, from just over $600 million the previous year. While the Philippine economy as a whole shrunk over 9% in the pandemic, we hope that innovative startups in these growth sectors will help drive our recovery. Upscale is ramping up our programs and partnerships to be able to support startups in these growth areas, as well as startups that address sustainability and support our disadvantaged communities. We will be supporting 2 batches of startups a year, in addition to facilitating more industry-academic collaborations and entrepreneurship training in the academia. We're looking forward to your participation in our events and activities.
Thank you, Pam, Karen, Dennis, and Dr. Sison for that inspiring video. We all felt your optimism for the Philippine startup ecosystem. The road to inclusive recovery, growth, and development is one that requires us to nurture Filipino talent and help them fulfill their highest potential. Let's hear more about these projects from DOST Undersecretary Rowena Cristina Guevara.
This pandemic has showcased and proven the ingenuity of our Filipino startups and showed how technology can increase opportunities and how it benefits our people in adjusting to the new normal. But startups still need help in keeping them afloat amidst the economic effects of the pandemic. As a response to this, we at the Department of Science and Technology launched the Startup Grant Fund Program, which provides funding support to innovative startups for them to overcome their R&D roadblocks, strengthen their intellectual property, establish market traction, refine their business model, and prepare a business continuity plan. Aside from the SGF, we have also launched a new program called Women Helping Women Innovating Social Enterprises, or WHWISE program, that will bring together government agencies and private organizations to prepare women-led social enterprises for growth, scalability, and subsequent venture capital funding. The program also provides a suite of services which includes early-stage funding, training, skills development, mentorship, and business incubation. More importantly, the program will provide access to technology to enable even women from rural communities to be part of the global value chain. Special focus is given to social enterprises in this program, since social enterprises are revenue-generating businesses with a mission to help communities. With these support programs of DOST, along with the programs of the Department of Trade and Industry and the Department of Information and Communications Technology, we believe that the Philippine startup ecosystem will continue to thrive. Seeing that startups can survive and be successful despite economic uncertainty in a volatile market, more people will be encouraged to put their ideas out and establish their own businesses. We in the government will continue to nurture Filipino talents and help you fulfill your highest potential for the growth of your business. We Filipinos face a lot of challenges and problems in our day-to-day lives, and we should see them as opportunities to innovate and develop solutions to benefit and improve lives. If you have an idea or concept that you think can solve a problem, validate that idea first before developing the solution. Once you have a prototype of that solution, you can ask assistance from our technology business incubators and avail of their services. These technology business incubators, or TBIs, are established to provide budding entrepreneurs with all the necessary resources and support that they need to evolve and grow into a mature business. This includes infrastructure support, technology or prototype development support, mentorship, business development assistance, help in pitching to investors to get funding, intellectual property management support, and access to the facilities and network of the host university, among others. The TBIs accelerate the development of young entrepreneurs from the idea stage to independent, self-sustaining, successful businesses. We have a total of 48 technology business incubators all over the country, and you are welcome to visit the TBI that is nearest to you. Also, with the signing of the Innovative Startup Act, the DOST, the DTI, and the DICT are establishing programs that will support startups at different stages of development, from idea to prototype, prototype to product, product to market, and then market to expansion. With all these programs in place, now is the best time to be a startup. So, I encourage everyone to pursue your innovations because we, at the government, together with the private sector, are here to help you.
Thank you for that insightful video, Yusek Gov. DOST's goal to empower startups will surely support the needs of the Filipino people. Our next speaker has been involved in developing and implementing the 2021 Philippine Startup Challenge, which supports new Filipino ventures by creating networks and providing more opportunities for their ICT-based innovations. To tell us how they plan to leverage the power of connectivity, let's welcome DICT Undersecretary Emmanuel Ray Caintic.
With most of the country's population leveraging the power of connectivity, the DICT is here to make sure that your government can provide an efficient and affordable way to keep everyone connected through the digital infrastructure plan. The DIP provides the blueprint of a fast, affordable, and reliable internet connectivity in the country, in line with our agency's vision to build a strong digital foundation for Filipinos nationwide. The two major programs under the DIP are the National Broadband Plan and the Free Wi-Fi program. We are now building the national fiber backbone of the country, which should serve as the digital highway for internet connection that will be cascaded to government agencies. And the Free Wi-Fi program is exploring partnerships with different provincial and local government units and telcos to provide connectivity in their respective localities and other far-flung areas of the country. To support the development of startup cities, we have been conducting startup ecosystem mapping, which is a multi-stakeholder activity using a discussion platform and other metric tools adapted from global startup community enablers to assist the current local startup culture and initiatives in a city. In partnership with QBO Innovation Hub and key startup community players, we involve the academe, government, private organizations, and active startups in the ecosystem mapping. We view mapping as an important process to gather relevant stakeholders, identify strengths and gaps in providing support for startups with the locality, and collaborate and benchmark against 100 cities globally. With a lot of individuals and groups planning to kick off their own startup businesses, the DICT alongside the DOST and the DTI plans to support these startups through the Digital Startup Development and Acceleration Program. The program aims to enrich and strengthen the competitive advantage of Filipino startups, especially in the countryside. Among the 4 components of the DSDAP is the Innovation Network that fosters a culture of mentorship, partnership, and collaboration of innovators nationwide. Some of the activities that the DICT conducts are startup workshops, coaching and mentoring, bootcamps, learning sessions, and pitching competitions. Another component of this program is DICT Startup Grant Fund. The fund will provide grants for ICT-based startups that has passed the selection and application process. This will allow the government to encourage the establishment and operation of innovative new businesses, strengthen, promote, and develop an ecosystem of businesses and government and non-government institutions that cultivate an innovative entrepreneurial culture in the Philippines. Overall, we at the DICT intend to continuously build a strong Filipino startup community. We will continue to work to provide more support to the startup ecosystem. Our main goal is always to hope for the continuous growth and progress of every Filipino.
Thank you so much, Undersecretary Caintig. We're excited about DICT's plans to further connect business communities, and we cannot wait to reap the benefits of improved connectivity. As Filipinos have proven countless times, we can make the most of what we have. With e-commerce, fintech, and other sectors seeing a huge boost since last year, let's hear from DTI's Undersecretary Rafaelita Aldaba on how DTI plans to create opportunities for startups to grow.
The vision of DTI is clear, and that is to make the Philippine tech startup ecosystem an engine of economic recovery, inclusive growth, and job creation. We believe that startups could catalyze innovation in the country. To realize all this, we keep our focus on growing the number of startups, providing early-stage funding, and implementing incubation and acceleration programs to build more quality startups. We are supporting 8 regional inclusive innovation centers in the country located in major cities like Cebu, Davao, and Cagayan de Oro. The goal is to connect startups and spin-offs from universities with government agencies and the business sector and help them accelerate the commercialization of their products and services. We work very closely with the DOST and DICT as we implement the Innovative Startup Act. We harmonize and align our startup policies and programs to ensure that we are able to address the needs of startups at every level in their development life cycle. DTI, through the National Development Company, will be implementing the Startup Venture Fund, a fund of funds program with venture capitalists and other partners. Initially, the budget is 250 million pesos or $5 million. We are also starting to provide incubation, development, and entrepreneurship program for startups with minimum viable products. And for startups that are in the commercial stages, we are providing an acceleration, valuation, and corporate entrepreneurship program. Both programs aim to help startups grow and scale up their business operations. We are also going to implement a global acceleration program to immerse and expose Philippine startups to the global ecosystem and enable them to pursue global business development and raise funds. We are also in the process of building a National Center for Artificial Intelligence Research. This is going to serve as a hub for data scientists and other researchers who would be conducting AI R&D, AI trainings, and AI consultancy services. This center aims primarily to support the AI needs of startups, MSMEs, and large enterprises. And I think this is going to be a great place for AI startups, especially for training, entrepreneurship, and mentorship. Digital entrepreneurial mindset, design thinking, entrepreneurship, and innovation are all equally important for growth. Having a productive mindset is crucial in view of the magnitude of problems that need to be solved. Design thinking and innovation can make the world a better place and help people become more effective and allow more social mobility. Let's not forget empathy, which is a very powerful tool to meet the unmet and unexpressed needs of customers. We need empathy to innovate, and listening to customers is key to develop genuine empathy. This is the secret of Google, ostentatious listening to customers. DTI continues to create plans and programs to promote Filipino talent and creativity both here and abroad. We have been encouraging our startups to create products and services focusing on both the local and global markets. Together with DTI foreign trade offices, we have been organizing startup missions to connect our startups with startup ecosystems abroad. Since 2017, the DTI has promoted 121 Filipino startups in 26 international events in 10 countries across 3 continents in Asia, America, and Europe. We also continue to participate virtually in some of the largest technology conferences and events in the US, Canada, Korea, Hong Kong, China, Taiwan, Germany, among others. Based on the Innovative Startup Act, government could support the participation of startups in local and international events by providing expedited processing of travel documents and providing full or partial subsidy for fees and charges in the application, travel documents, baggage allowances for materials, equipment, and other products that are pertinent to participation in startup event, along with round-trip airfare and per diem allowance.
I'm sure I can speak on behalf of everyone that we truly appreciate your message, Yusek Vita. It's an exciting time for tech startups as they continue to challenge themselves to build scalable and sustainable businesses. Our last speaker will talk about the role of collaboration in building a stronger startup ecosystem. Let's hear from Mr. Rene Butch-Maley, President of Ideaspace Foundation and QBO Innovation Hub.
Philippine Startup Week is one of the key activities that allow us to bring the startup ecosystem to the public and to potential partners and customers both here and abroad. At QBO, we are always working to bring the tech startup ecosystem to more Filipinos. We organize regular public events like the Kupitan and Basics. This year, we've also partnered with 10 movers within the tech startup ecosystem for the Community Advocate Program. This allowed us to expand our work to more communities and support the work of community leaders nurturing ecosystems around the country. In the past few years, we have seen the Philippine startup ecosystem give birth to new ideas, new businesses, and new leaders. This would not be possible without collaboration. Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Science and Technology, and the Department of Information and Communications Technology have played important roles in advocating for startups in the country. And we are excited to learn how they will expand their support for startups. We hope to see the same commitment to the development of startups from more government agencies. In many ways, the pandemic presented a unique opportunity for startups to showcase the widespread applications of their creative solutions. Today, QBO remains in the business of empowering the future leaders of the startup ecosystem with boot camps, incubation, and acceleration programs, and even seed funding. We hope to support more founders as they pursue their dreams and scale their startups. We also hope to encourage more government and corporate collaborations with startups. And we hope that this week's conference can be an avenue for these partnerships. We've seen that a community that encourages, supports, and empowers each other can create success for more Filipinos. This is the spirit that fuels our ecosystem, and one that we hope people will embrace this entire week and for the rest of the year. As we explore the Philippine startup ecosystem over the next few days, I hope that you will be inspired to join us here today. And who knows, one of you may have the next idea that will send waves of change across the country.
Thank you, Butch. I hope the founders and enablers watching us are inspired to contribute to our growing startup community. This is just a taste of what Philippine Startup Week has in store for all of you. More activities, including the main summits hosted by the 3 government agencies, are scheduled for this week-long event. Furthermore, there are over 50 community events organized by accelerators, tech companies, schools, investors, and other organizations from across the country, covering a wide range of topics. Philippine Startup Week will also feature up-and-coming Filipino startups through pitching competitions, expo booths, and segments such as the QBO Top 100 Startups and Startup Pinay. There's a lot to look forward to, so make sure you join us for the next 5 days. Should you post about this week's events, you may use the official hashtag PHSW21, and tag @Philippine Startup Week 2021 on Facebook and LinkedIn. For more updates, you can also visit phstartupweek.com. Thank you again to all of our speakers for the enthusiasm and positivity they have shown in their videos. I am Kat Chan, and it's been a pleasant morning to spend with everyone.
I'm the DOST Undersecretary for Research and Development, Rowena Cristina Guevara.
I am the ICT Undersecretary for Digital Philippines, Emmanuel Ray Craintic.
I'm Rafaelita Aldaba, Department of Trade and Industry, Undersecretary for Competitiveness and Innovation.
I am DTI Secretary Ramon M. Lopez.
I am DOST Secretary Fortunato de la Peña.
I'm QBO Innovation Hub and Idea Space Foundation President, Butch Mayley.
Welcome to Philippine Startup Week 2021.
Wow, I hope that video inspires a lot of viewers at home and gave them something to aspire to as we go through this week-long startup conference. We have a lot of events to look forward to for the rest of the week, with this year's theme of Beyond Recovery, Filipino startups redefining opportunity. How has the ecosystem worked together to move past recovery and uncover opportunities for startups? We'll be discussing this in a panel discussion titled Beyond Recovery, a Tech-Forward Philippines. We have Mr. David Almirol of Multisys, Mr. Francis Plaza of Paymongo, and Lisa Gokongwei of Summit Media and JG Summit Holdings. Moderating this discussion is Mr. Manny Ayala, who currently runs the Philippine office of Endeavor, a New York-based nonprofit focused on helping high-impact entrepreneurs scale up their businesses. Let us all give them a warm round of applause.
Welcome everyone to PH Startup Week 2021. I must say I love the theme that was chosen for this year, Beyond Recovery, Filipino Startups Redefining Opportunity. After 20 months of the pandemic, I think it's fair to say that A, we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, and B, there has surfaced a whole range of opportunities looking for clever startups to solve them. And so in this first panel discussion, which is entitled Tech Forward, we're going to take a wide-ranging look at how different segments of the business community are embracing the need to digitalize. And so we're very lucky to have three panelists today representing, you might say, three different sizes of companies: conglomerates, SMEs, and early startups. So, ladies first, our first guest is Liza Gokongwei, who's the head of digital innovation at JG Summit, representing, of course, the conglomerates. Liza is also one of the most active angel investors in the Philippines, having invested in companies like Kumu, Grocery, and Podcast Network Asia. Next, we have, representing, I guess, the more mature companies, you might say the SME segment, would be David Almirol, the founder of Multisys. And David has an amazing story, which includes a stint working on a U.S. military base in Fallujah in Iraq. So go and Google David and you'll find out his amazing story. So Multisys, which I guess took off in 2010, is a full-service software solutions company now serving over 2,500 companies and organizations, right, spanning both the corporate world as well as government. And very impressively, David was named a 10 Outstanding Young Man honoree in 2020. Last but not least, we have the baby of the group, representing the early stage startups, is Francis Plaza, the founder of Paymongo, which got its start in 2018. Francis is a coder through and through. Started coding at the age of 9, got into MIT, and then graduated with a degree in computer science. Worked as a software engineer at Oracle, and made it to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list recently. One of the things you may not know about Francis, he really enjoys traveling. He's visited over 36 countries to date, and his target is to hit 50 countries before turning 50. Okay, so with that, let's get on with our panel. And I thought what we might do for today, to give the discussion a little bit of structure, is to talk about three things. What has changed during the pandemic? Like, what have you observed in your own neck of the woods with respect to technology? Second is, well, once we get out of this pandemic, where do you see the Philippines going? Right? And then maybe a final discussion on the Philippine startup ecosystem. Where do you think we're at? How do you think we're doing? And what else needs to get done? Okay, so to start the discussion, I'm going to call on Liza, representing the large companies. And Liza, maybe when I ask you this question, think both about what's happening inside the JG Summit group, as well as what's happening in the investee companies that you have now. So the question really is, how did the pandemic change the way you did things? So when we think about, whether it's Cebu Pacific, Robinsons, right? Was there a different way that you had to operate, especially with respect to technology?
Okay. I guess I have a perspective because I do run the digital transformation office of the conglomerate, and we are tasked with enabling cultural transformation and business transformation in the business units. No, so we do, our remit is to teach the new ways of working, as they call them, because we believe that in order to do business transformation, you have to do cultural transformation first. So when we were set up about 3 years ago, the demand for our services
Wait, this came before the pandemic, pa?
This was before
Wow.
the pandemic. The demand for our services was, I would say, maybe scarce. No, no one was. Not many people were very interested. I had to keep knocking on doors and begging to, to serve them.
Yeah.
But right when the pandemic happened, wow, we have never been as busy as now. So I think there really has been a change in the conglomerate because COVID has really made it urgent for us to change. And so I think in terms of culture, it's moving very fast now, and in a way, I think that's good. So I think does that answer your question? So,
Yeah, like
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
And I guess kudos to you guys for beginning to wrestle with this even before it was needed, right? And
Yes.
it actually, your comment made me think of something I read recently, right? Which was, in the last 2 years, most of the world has done about, I don't know, 3 to 5 years worth of digitization, right? Which seems to suggest is the kind of thing that people knew they had to do, but they just kept kicking the can down the road, right? Until, wow, lo and behold, we had this crisis, right? But I wanted to find out was, like, for instance, in the airline business or the grocery business, as a consumer, would I notice anything, or are these all efficiencies kind of in the background that we don't see? Or even things like, since we can't do much face to face, right? Did you have to completely re-engineer the whole way you do the business?
Yeah,
Like,
I think
what are
for
some examples now of that?
yeah, I have a more of a perspective. I think Cebu Pacific has been even before COVID, since about over 90% of its sales are happening online. It's really been one of the most digitally transformed businesses in the country, even prior to COVID. But clearly, they've had to do a lot of things to, apart from digital transformation, to make sure that it survived this terrible 2 years. But I can speak from a retail point of view that digital transformation happened obviously from the e-commerce, the interface with the user, but it also happened. It's also happening. It always begins with that. It happens with you put up, you make sure you're online. And then you work backwards, right? You start making sure that digital transformation happens behind the scenes as well. So those things are happening. There's a lot of design thinking happening. They're starting to introduce data science already. So Robinsons is already doing agile ways of working.
Yeah.
So a lot of things happening.
That's
Clearly we still need to do a lot of things, but they're happening.
So when COVID hit, I'll shift gears a little bit before I move on to David, right? In terms of your own investments, now I know you also started doing investments, before COVID, right? But looking at the companies that you did invest in, right? How did these guys fare during the last 2 years? I know some really took off, but did all of them really explode in a positive way, or was it a mixed bag?
Okay. So as we all know Kumu, no? They just announced their Series C raise at 320 million peso dollar valuation.
That's right.
And when I personally invested in it, and when Summit invested in them about 3 years ago, we didn't realize the trajectory would be like this, and I think COVID really contributed to it. People started, what do you do during COVID? You're stuck at home, no? And so it just suddenly exploded. and then there are other businesses like Edamama, which is also doing quite well.
Mhm.
Bookie is interesting. I think Ben Wintle launched Bookie a long time ago, and because of because of COVID, before COVID they were about to take off. Their marketplace
Yeah.
was about to take off, but that slowed down because restaurants had to close. But they were able to expand their remit now, and they're now actually they've created a solution that is on premise. So
Wow.
I think you will see that when you go to when things open up, I think Bookie will probably be in many restaurants,
Mm.
and it will be providing solutions for restaurants
That's
on
terrific.
premise.
That's
So
terrific.
I mean, we see that a lot of these entrepreneurs have really pivoted and grabbed opportunities during COVID.
Yeah. And then there's also grocery, right? So I feel like we're co-parents in a way, Liza, because
Yes.
both Kumu and Grocery are Endeavor companies, so we're like you. We're also trying to help them scale up. But I think they've also had significant growth in the last 20 months.
Yes, grocery, JG Summit, maybe I can really talk about how JG Summit has looked at this digital transformation. First is there's the transformation internally for the existing business units, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
The second one is taking stock of our unfair advantage, as McKinsey would call it, no,
Mhm.
and trying to understand where can we invest our money,
Yeah.
what new businesses or new sectors can we put our money in, where we have maybe a good brand reputation, where we have a big consumer base already,
Mhm.
where we can have access to capital. So something like Grocery, they needed our RHI, which is our retail group. Actually, sorry, most of our business units actually have their own corporate venture capital. And
Oh.
RHI
Okay.
and Grocery was the perfect partner for Grocery because Grocery actually uses RHI as a dark store
Mm.
from which they pick and distribute to the Sari Sari stores. So
That's
it's a
awesome.
great partnership. So
Yeah.
this is where you see how conglomerates can actually work with startups to to um, to create something new.
That's
And,
terrific.
yeah, and then the third thing we do is we invest in startups as pure, not as strategic partners, but just as pure ROI,
Yeah.
because we think that before venture capital, there was corporate venture capital. Before Fox, companies like Foxmont, right,
Mhm.
came in these independent VCs. There was corporate venture capital from Kickstart or JG Dev. We invest in for ROI purposes,
Mhm.
but also because we want to understand, where industries are going, and these bright minds are the perfect way to they're leading the way. People like Francis and David.
Great. Fantastic. Well, speaking of
Yeah.
David, I'm going to turn over to you, right? So during the last 20 months or so, right? Almost 2 years, I'm sure a lot of people knocked on your door, right? Because that's what you've been doing essentially for the last decade is helping businesses digitalize, right? Helping them in their journey to digitize. Can you talk a little bit about what happened to you guys during the last kind of 20 months? What happened with your business? What did you see there?
It's been a shock, actually, Manny. We didn't expect that everyone will be like not knocking at our door, everyone's door, as mentioned by Liza a while ago. And maybe multisys were one of the doors that we need help. I think technology becoming like a necessity. Before, it's just an option, right? Because you can still operate in a very physical interaction way. But
Mhm.
nowadays, you don't have choice but to embed technology to your operation. You don't have choice but
Yeah.
to adapt, paperless, maybe contactless, and even cashless transactions to your business.
Mhm.
Thankfully, we have a lot of ready solutions. Before the pandemic, we developed a lot of futuristic solutions. These
Mhm.
are predictive solutions that were not that necessary at that time. But during the pandemic, it became like a necessity. So it became like a slingshot also to us, as mentioned by Liza. We don't have choice but to open a lot of doors, and partnership become our model, since we don't really want competition. We love to partner with everyone. So instead of us competing to anyone, we rather open what we have, and we rather show them what we have. And there you go. It become like a stitching up the gaps of technology in the Philippines. So it's quite amazing journey.
Yeah, I know you do a lot of work, not just with corporates, but with the government as well, right? I think I was watching an interview. I think the passport I have is probably partly enabled by you guys, right? But when you look at the pandemic, who, in your opinion, who had a bigger need for you guys, government or corporate, or was it equally, sort of a necessity for both of them?
For me, it's equal. Private and government, they are actually interrelated. They are literally connected, right? You cannot do private without the government. You cannot do government without the private. So there are gaps there, but technology was able to merge them together. But more likely in the government, Manny, we're quite busy in smart cities. We're very inclined in helping the government in ease of doing business, providing multiple solutions to LGUs and even the national government. Right now, we're serving like 18 national government agencies, and we have like 52 smart cities. These are the bigger, municipality and cities all throughout the country. And we expect to onboard around 250 LGUs in the next 24 months. So I think
Terrific.
replicating what we have is
Yeah.
very efficient. Yeah.
Do you do much work with ARTA, the Anti-Red Tape Authority, or not yet?
Oh yes, to be honest, I love working with them. We signed agreement with them already, Amani, just to inform you. So it's quite a very inspiring journey because ARTA is promoting not only ease of doing business but also anti-red tape, right?
Yeah.
And to make sure that we're able to streamline the processes. We're working with them already, Manny, and they are helping us in implementing our smart city platform for LGUs.
Okay, great. We'll hold on to that thought, the smart city. Let's reserve that for the future looking part. So at this point, I'd like to turn over to Francis. So Francis, right? So you're the baby of the bunch. You launched the business in 2018, right? That was the year you did Y
2019
Combinator.
actually.
Sorry.
2019.
Oh,
Yeah.
Y Combinator was when? Was
It was summer of 2019 in
Oh, it
June.
was 2019. Okay, my gosh, you're even younger than I thought. So, from a standing start, again, you guys have grown by leaps and bounds, right? I mean, you've already done a few major fundraisings, right? Impressively with investors from the Valley, including Stripe and Peter Thiel, right? So, kudos to you guys. But
Thanks.
I'm sure people came a knocking as well, right?
Mhm.
You guys. I'm sure people are like, oh, we can't do face to face anymore. We have to make payments another way, right? So maybe share with us what happened to you this last 20 months.
Yeah, quite interestingly, we started the company just about 6 months before the pandemic was looming, and of course, none of us could have predicted that. And when we started out, we just had one goal, basically solving a particular problem we experienced ourselves. So we were starting different companies before that, and payments was the hardest thing to integrate into software. It was also the most, and it still is the most unsexy thing of any business. That's the thing that you shouldn't really spend a lot of time on. So we believed in that, and so we decided in mid 2019 to try and solve it ourselves. So we were like a bunch of software engineers, 8 people, and just naive enough to think that we could enter finance at all. So none of us had finance background. And so when we started out, we're just like 10, 15 people when we ended 2019. And we launched with just a few products to help small businesses, actually. In fact, even micro businesses, those who are starting out their business in Facebook and Instagram. So we didn't really initially build for big use cases. So it was helping those small guys go online. And when the pandemic happened, so we were at that time probably less than 30 people at the start of 2020. All of a sudden, we had all these businesses needing the solutions that we initially built for the Facebook and Instagram sellers. So the entire 2020 was a learning experience for all of us. We had to build new products. We had to build and scale the team to cater different use cases, from restaurants going online to some brick and mortar shops, and providing them solutions from the basic payment form to APIs.
Yeah.
So we believe that the transformation going online was apparent even before the pandemic, but I guess COVID somehow accelerated that and basically forced everyone overnight to adapt to it. So we see that even post COVID, and maybe COVID is here to stay with us, but post this pandemic and lockdown, I think that the trend will really even accelerate even further. We're just starting out. Even in fact, even now, payments are still being done mostly in checks. So that tells us that there's still a lot more to do.
So digitalization started out for many years, I guess, like a vitamin, right? Yeah, it's good for you. I know I need it, but I can blow it off, right? I don't need it. But I think what happened, right, is it turned into an aspirin, right? Because everyone had a big headache and they had to get it now, right? So this would be a good time to maybe shift gears a little bit and start thinking about the future, right? I think it's fair to say we're not fully there yet, right? In terms of a digital economy, right? What, on a scale of, let's say, 0% to 100%, right? 100% being we're a fully digital economy. Nasaan kaya tayo? Where do you think we are?
We're, as I tell the team that, I think we're just 1%. Like, there's still a lot more work to do. As I said, like payments, like in our case, and there's still a lot of work to do, not just in payments, but like all the necessary infrastructure of the internet. In payments, for example, like most banking transactions are still done manually in checks, and there's still a lot more room for the industry to shift towards taking advantage of all these new tools, new form factors. And as technology evolving, you have 4G, 5G, and technology becoming cheaper and cheaper. I think the internet will just keep on enabling more innovation. So yeah, we think that we're just 1%, and there's still a lot more to do over time.
Liza, does it seem to you like we're at 1%, at least in JG, in the stuff you're doing?
Wow, it's such a hard question to answer, Manny. I was looking at the Google.
Ball, right?
I'm sure everyone here has read the Google report from yesterday, and it maybe we're little more than 1%. I was surprised that there were a lot of at least 10 or 20 million people who started, who joined, who bought something online or used an e-commerce service it. I knew that already, but seeing it in a report made it so much more concrete. So maybe a little more than 1%, maybe, I don't know, 5%.
Okay, but
I do think the biggest, I think one of the biggest problems or challenges that everyone has here is to get to there is really the talent. There are so many problems to be solved and so many pain points to be fixed, but it's so very difficult to find the talent. I think everyone is really fighting for the same people, and unless we are able to find that talent in the Philippines, I think it may move more slowly than we hope. I think.
Do you observe, and this is for all of you, right? Do you observe, Philippine companies beginning to, I guess, in a sense, look at foreign talent to try to fill the gaps? What are you guys seeing? We can't find them here. Are we going to India? Are we going to China? Are we going to Eastern Europe? We're going to Israel? We're going to South America?
For me, Manny, we have a lot of talents actually in the Philippines. I think it's all about how to make them merge in a organized team. That's very important. We have a lot of talents, but we need teamwork. There's such thing as like a standalone programmer or standalone designer. Making it more united in a way for them to be more simplified. I believe that. I believe that's maybe 5 to 10% in my case, because we're supporting a lot of technology enabled companies. But think complexity made it very painful sometimes, Manny,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of complexity in technology, and simplifying it will be more more advantageous to make sure that we're able to maximize the talents in the Philippines. We have a lot. We have enough.
Yeah, I saw a great video of you in your beautiful multi-sys campus, right? That gleaming building of yours. And I think part of what you do, right, is focus a lot on training, right? Maybe
Yes.
share with us what is it that you do that you're able to get all these guys, to work as a united team? Because I'm sure in the last 20 months, your book of orders has just exploded, right? So how do you keep up with that?
Well, because I'm a full stack programmer, Manny. So my mindset, I'm a programmer, so I
Yeah.
know the feeling. I know the mindset. uh, you cannot force programmers to work. You have to inspire them. You have to make them feel that they love what they do. You have to make them realize that what you do is playing. Playing
Mm.
is different to working. Working is quite tiring, Manny, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
creating that culture playing is very efficient and very effective to us. That's why when I did not realize that Multis will go big, Manny, because I was alone that time. 10 years,
Yeah.
like 5 years, 2010 to 2015, I am the only guy in Multisys, literally. But I think that mindset of creating a nice environment, a nice mindset, a nice um, teamwork became like our model in Multisys. The
Mhm.
culture, I want it more as a playground, not a
Yeah.
workplace. So
Yeah.
when I build that campus, top of my mind is to how to make people play while becoming very productive. That's why we change the culture. So we create some kind of like a competitive environment where people are bullying in a good way, to each
Yeah. Yeah.
other, so that they will grow fast. I think those are the things that we've changed, and of course we embed a lot of stuff inside the campus just to make things more,
Yeah.
more fun than working.
The holy grail, right, is if you're doing something that you love, then it's like you're not
Mhm.
working, right? Well, so I want to ask you,
Correct.
Francis, right? Because when you started, you were like this band of brothers, right?
Yes.
These coders. Iilan lang kayo, right? Just a handful.
Mhm.
How many are you now?
We're 150 people.
Okay, so, from 0 to 100, well, from 1 to 150 in like 2 years. How did you do that? Where did you find these people that Liza has such a hard time finding? Paano mo
Yeah,
nagawa yan?
yeah, no, it's been a crazy growth over the last 2.5 years. To put that in perspective, we ended 2020, we were probably just around 50. So definitely most of the hiring was done during the height of the pandemic. I have
Yeah.
not seen most of the folks in person, unfortunately. So hopefully soon when things open up a little bit more. But to Liza's point, like talents, really, it's super hard to find, especially technical talents, engineering talents, where as an engineering company ourselves really need a lot more. Like we need to double our size to even hit many of the products we have on the roadmap, and it's becoming harder and harder. So definitely we've been considering a lot of options, both locally and also regionally, to expand the talent pool. But yeah, I think like there are, to David's point, there are a lot of talents in the Philippines. You just need to cultivate them, basically have and provide them with the right foundations. I think I guess that's the gap and the missed opportunities. And I think there are a lot of initiatives now, especially taking advantage of things becoming online, that more and more, there are startups trying out to train new software engineers for like 16 weeks, for example. So I think those are opportunities that we can help and support, and we love supporting those folks as well,
So,
because these are
so,
talents we could use.
so if you met a bright young high schooler, right? Somebody was very quantitative, already had an interest in CS. Would you tell them, sige, mag-aral ka, go get a degree, right? In a university, or would you tell them, figure this out online because there's a lot of resources? What
Yeah.
What would you advise this young, brilliant high schooler?
Yeah, well, of course, the advice will vary per context now, but quite interestingly, we have hired a lot of folks who have not actually completed their degrees or even not even have gone to college.
Yeah.
One of my co-founders, Luis, did not complete his degree in college. So, like, I think like with technology becoming more and more accessible, education has to change as well. So our bias would be, if you are super talented, you can write code at like 10 years old. We want to cultivate you and get you moving as soon as possible.
I don't know. Did you ever meet my son? My son Miguel. So he has a degree in computer science, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
second year, he asked me, "Papa, is it okay if I don't finish?" So of course I had to tell him, "No, you have to finish." But it's interesting because I do meet a lot of these brilliant guys who didn't have quite the conventional academic route, right? Because so much you can learn by doing and by researching on the internet, right? Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit, going back to an earlier point by David. Now, this idea of a smart city, right? A smart Philippines. I'm very intrigued by that because even just as a consumer and as a citizen, right, it would be great if our lives were much more efficient, right, through digitization. So, share with me your vision. What's your dream for us, and what do we need to do as a country?
Well, maybe I'm thinking for the future, Manny.
Yeah.
Imagine, because of this pandemic, everything is like slingshot, multiple ways. And imagine the complexity in the future. Imagine that if the government will not fix that complexity, I can see a fiasco in terms of like connectivity, processing, etc., etc. That's why the goal of Multisys right now is we do some kind of like simplification. Simplifying the process is the way to move forward. You don't need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 step. Maybe you can do 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2 step. And we've done that with a lot of national government agency and local government agency. So the vision and dream of me personally and Multisys is to contribute somehow to prepare the next generation, to simplify the processes. Because simplifying the process, we will save a lot of money. The government for the past 10 years, they spent billions and billions of pesos to innovate and to fix something or to solve something. But if we're able to integrate, as mentioned by Francis a while ago, I've seen the API of PayMongo. It's very simple to use. It's all about simplicity. Once we have that kind of simplicity and once we have that kind of integration, we're going to avoid a so-called Frankenstein systems. Frankenstein system is really scary, and it's a cancer that's really hard to fix. When PLDT invested to Multisys, we've seen a lot of legacy systems. I'm sure Liza also can agree that legacy platforms are really hard to innovate, but you don't have choice but to fix those kind of problems. So same thing with the government. So the vision is to simplify and make sure that we're able to contribute in this ease of doing business strategy of the government as well.
Okay, so the key point: avoid Frankenstein. Right. I think you tech guys call it. You pay all this technical debt, right? When you do things sloppily at the beginning. We have a little bit more time, so I wanted to end on a topic that Liza kind of touched on, right? Which is to solve a lot of these things, we're going to have to rely on clever entrepreneurs, right? People like you, Francis, and like you, David. So I want to talk a little bit about the Philippine startup ecosystem, right? We've made such tremendous strides. In a way, I kind of feel we're at an inflection point, both with the amount of capital from serious investors coming in, as well as some of the talents coming through. Right, there are more, I would say, very high capability entrepreneurs coming into the scene. Right, so maybe first we can talk about where do we think we are, and then what do we need to do to get even better. Right? Who would like to go first? Where do we think we are? Because we obviously know that Indonesia now has 6 or 7 unicorns, soon to be 10, right? Singapore has a whole bunch. Malaysia has 1 or 2. But maybe that's not even the right thing to look at. Maybe the thing to look at is how do we compare to what we were, a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago? Because I would argue, man, we're doing well compared to where we were a few years ago. So who would like to give it a shot first? How do we think we're doing as an ecosystem?
Yeah, Manny, for me, we are the very, very exciting early stage, I believe, as an ecosystem. And, just compare a little more than 2 years ago when we started, it was particularly hard, one, to even get folks interested to what we were doing, right? When you're an early stage and or not even having a product yet. It was hard to fundraise, but also it's just having the support system that you need in order to just build your product was particularly challenging. And what's exciting to me now, and I actually just came over from a trip to Leyte over the weekend, meeting entrepreneurs who are starting their own like tech startup in the province and getting invested by Silicon Valley angels. To
Wow.
me, that's inspiring, right? So you're seeing entrepreneurs from all backgrounds, not just folks from Cebu or Manila. We're seeing them in dozens of them coming out, right? They're now seeing success stories from others and getting inspired to even start their own. So, me and my co-founder Louis started a small fund just to help these guys get started, right? In the very crazy early stage when, it's almost impossible to have, everyone believe in them. So for me, what makes me excited is seeing those guys just trying out. And I think we need more of those folks. We need thousands of them to even cultivate our ecosystem further.
Mm-hmm. Liza, what do you observe, right? Because you've been investing now for several years, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in the last couple
you
of
know,
years.
from the
Yeah.
first investment I made, which was actually an Indian startup called Good Glam, which became a unicorn yesterday.
Whoa! Congrats.
I was so suerte. But I think so. In the first maybe 2 years of my angel investing, I did maybe 3 investments. But the past year, wow, I think I added 12 just personally. That's personally. And I so totally it's the momentum is really there, the acceleration. I think people have entrepreneurs have really found an opportunity to launch businesses. And I think I know who Francis is talking about. No, I think we're both invested in this amazing guy from the province.
Introduce him to Endeavor also, Francis.
For sure, I will.
Fantastic. I mean, when I spoke to him, I was like blown away with what he was able to do with his coders and his talent in the province. And so I totally agree. I think it's really a matter of all these entrepreneurs finding the confidence, but also the skills to learn, because you can be an entrepreneur, but you don't know how to do the lean startup method. And this is what I was talking about when I was saying talent. The inherent talent of the Filipino is definitely there. It's just that we need to be trained somehow. So Y Combinator, these Techstars, these accelerator programs are going to be very, very useful. And then, of course, I think venture capital, independent venture capital like Foxmont, that's very important. They've done such a great job, sniffing out these entrepreneurs, and they've made so many investments. I think in the past year, I think 20 or 20 investments. I think corporate venture capital, like in JG Summit alone, we have JG Dev. URC put up one for Alt Protein. RHI has been investing. RLC is putting up a space just for entrepreneurs. And they're also going to co-invest with these entrepreneurs, aside from giving them free space. And Summit Media has been investing as well. So I think that and maybe all the sea turtles coming back, sea turtles from the Ivy Leagues, from the consulting companies, as well as from maybe the Grabs of the world and the Gojeks of the world, maybe those who have had exposure, or the Gcashes of the world. I mean, there's a lot of alumni who can start leading their own businesses.
Well, I'm definitely
definitely
excited.
going to happen.
I'm very excited. But I mean, we did a study, just over a year ago with Bain, right? Endeavor did a study with Bain, looking at, what was needed to get this ecosystem to be even better. And as it turns out, the three most critical pillars are access to talent, access to capital, access to market. Market meaning customers, right? And I think what you're describing now is, certainly on the capital side, you're seeing more and more. On the talent front, right now we're even going to places as far away as Leyte, right? We're beginning to see interesting talent, plus the returnees, right? Plus the MIT graduates like Francis, diba? David, what are you seeing in terms of us as an ecosystem? Do you think the flywheel is beginning to turn, that we are getting that momentum? What's your sense?
Oh yes. Well, we all know, right? Filipinos, we're so-called fast movers. We are fast reactors. We react. We can easily see the problem and then put a solution into it. And I think startups are moving on that kind of mentality nowadays. And I believe on combining things more uniquely, especially innovators plus investors, as mentioned by Liza, but plus mentorship. Quite sad because we've seen a lot of startups, they have bright ideas, but 99% of startups were failing in the Philippines because of one single reason. They're repeating the same mistake. Once they have the money, they burn the money, and then they weren't able to build the value, and they weren't able to build the revenue at the same time. So they exhaust the money, and then there you go. It will go to a nowhere situation. That's why uh, most of them, if you ask startups nowadays why you need money, so they will ask you, I need to have a very good technology. So Multisis is coming into the picture that we are not only investing financially, but we also assist them technologically to make sure they build a strong foundation in terms of technology so that they will not repeat the same mistake, because they can easily come up with a bright idea, but creating a frail system will elongate the process. So meaning in the early stage, if we're able to solidify the technological foundation that they have, I think we can help them grow and be successful in the future. Yeah, I think innovation, investment plus mentorship will be a very good tandem for them to be successful.
That's terrific. And I think this is kind of a good place to end. And I'll maybe plug Endeavor a little bit, right? I'm glad you mentioned mentorship, right? So we have a research group in New York called Endeavor Insight. And in 2015, they did this massive study of the ecosystem in New York, right? And they looked at which of these companies went on to become high performers. High performers defined as companies that raised the most money, had the biggest exits, had the biggest companies, right? And one thing they saw very clearly was that if you were a company that had a successful mentor guiding you, you were 3 times more likely to be one of the top performers, right? And that's precisely at the heart of what we do at Endeavor, right? Yes, we invest in companies, but fundamentally, it's about helping people like Francis, who's going through the process now. People like Rexy and Roland from Kumu, people like ER and Shiv from Rosary, right? It's really to help them dream bigger and help them scale up by getting access to this global network of 5,000 very successful entrepreneurs and business people. And the ethos that makes the wheel go round in Endeavor is paying it forward. So we love that that's what you're doing, David, because we think for this ecosystem to level up, one of the ingredients really is, are people willing to pay it forward, which is something you see in spades in Silicon Valley. I see we've run out of time, so I would like to thank our guests, Liza, David, and Francis, for spending this 1 hour with us. My takeaways from this discussion, just a few. One is, in the last 20 months, we've seen a great leap forward in digitization, but we're only kind of 5 to 10% of the way there, so there's still lots more to come. A lot of these problems need to be solved by clever entrepreneurs, but one of the roadblocks is access to talent. But the good news in our ecosystem is the flywheel has begun to move, right? We are getting momentum in terms of access to capital, in terms of interesting talent, both from within the Philippines as well as coming back to the Philippines. With that, we'll end. And if anyone in the audience has any questions, please drop it into the chat box. And at this point, I will turn the floor back over to our host.
Thank you, Mr. David Almirol, Mr. Francis Plaza, Ms. Lisa Gokongwei, and Mr. Manny Ayala, for all of your valuable insights. The future of the country is truly bright with the cooperation and support of the ecosystem. As Filipino startups push themselves to reach greater heights, the ecosystem is always ready to support startups, and we hope that you can find your next co-founder, investor, or mentor here during the conference. Moving on, our next speaker is Mr. Rexy Dorado, co-founder and president of Kumu, the largest live stream community app for Filipinos. Kumu has ranked among the top 3 highest grossing social app in the Philippines and top 10 in Canada and Kuwait. With over 4 million registered users around the world, before Kumu, Rexy founded Kaya Collaborative, a program that connects Filipino diaspora leaders to high-impact organizations in the Philippines, and even supported global entrepreneurs through roles in Ashoka and Endeavor. Kumu is a powerful social media platform that brings the voices of Filipinos from all over the globe at the forefront. Aside from presenting users real-time earning opportunities as a live streamer in various game shows and engagement in campaigns, Kumu also fosters communities that ignite relevant discussions among Filipinos. With its presentation titled Powering Next Generation Creators, how Kumu rose to become one of the Philippines' rising tech companies, let's hear about Kumu's journey and how this can be an inspiration to the ecosystem. Let us all welcome, with a round of applause, Mr. Dorado.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me at the Philippine Startup Week. It's great to be a part of such an important initiative. My name is Rexy. I'm one of the co-founders of Kumu, and just as a quick overview, we're a live streaming app built by and for the global Filipino community. We've been one of the top grossing social apps in the Philippines, top 5 in countries like Canada, and top 15 in the US because of, primarily because of the global Filipino community and its reach around the world. And we raised just recently our Series C funding, the first of its kind for a Filipino startup, bringing our total capital raised to over $100 million US. We'll go into, I think we were invited to join this conversation to talk a bit about the story behind that and how we got there and what it all means. But I guess to start with, I wanted to go into a bit of start from the beginning, right? And my personal intro. So I was born in Dumaguete City in the Philippines. I lived in Dumaguete for about 11 years before I moved to the United States and moved to Cleveland, Ohio, which was very different from Dumaguete, very different from the Philippines. One of the most, if you were to throw a dart at a map of the United States, one of the more different places from the Philippines, if out of really anywhere in America. And when I grew up there and I was in middle school, high school, I was one out of 4 Asian kids, one out of, I think, 2 Filipino kids out of a class of a school of 1,200. And a lot of that kind of journey when I was in the US ended up leading me to this path where I was trying to not be Filipino, right? I was trying to fit in with the people around me, the culture that was around me in the United States, and it wasn't until college when I started to kind of make my way back. Was part of a bit of a more diverse student body. I stumbled into leading the Filipino student group when I was at Brown, where I went to college. And at the end of that, started to kind of make my way back to the Philippines. Started to, I studied economics, development, really started to look at how countries like China and Brazil and India evolved, and really had to kind of carve my own space for learning about the evolution of the Philippines, the development of the Philippine economy. And what that led me to was in my last year of college, I started this nonprofit called Kaya Collaborative or Kaya Co, which brought back Filipinos, mostly college students and recent graduates from the US, from Canada, from Europe, just from all around the world, to come back to the Philippines, spend 2 months working with leading Filipino innovators, tech startups, social enterprises, creative businesses, just people who were building solutions from the ground. And kind of the heart of it, really, this idea of getting to know the country and where we were from in a way that was less about the past and where we came from, more about the future that was taking shape, and this exciting future that was being built by local Filipino leaders and was only just beginning. And so that that experience of building that among a lot of different things, just instilled in me an excitement about what could be done here and the things that could be built within the global Filipino community and within the Philippines. And that was kind of, for me at least, the path that led me to Kumu. About 2 years into building Kaya Collaborative, I met Roland, who's our CEO at Kumu. He joined our board of directors of that nonprofit, and I think 3 years after that, we'd meet every quarter on these board meetings, and we talk about how do we do this at a bigger scale. How do we not just bring 10, 20, 30 Filipinos back to the Philippines at a time, but how do we connect the global Filipino community in a way that really makes a dent, right, at the hundreds of million or over 100 million Filipinos that exist out there and are living in different parts of the world and in the Philippines. And in 2017 was when that really started to solidify. 2017, I think June, July, August 2017 was when the idea of Kumu really started. And that came from this, looking at the landscape, looking at Asia, WeChat in China, Kakao in Korea, Line in Japan, VNG in Vietnam had just launched Zalo a couple of years before that. VNG was a gaming company, a mobile gaming company in Vietnam, and they launched this messenger app that really started to put up a pretty strong fight against Facebook and Viber and WhatsApp and for the Vietnamese people. And we looked at that and kind of asked ourselves, why doesn't something like this exist in the Philippines, right? The Philippines being one of the actually the pound for pound most engaged in social media population in the world, with 100 million people, not a small country at all, right? And yet there were no, at the time, real consumer internet businesses, no native social platform, no native messenger app. So we started building about 6 months after that initial idea, started building what became the Kumu public beta in February 2018. That was Kumu, the messenger app. So very different from the Kumu that we know now, but we spent about 6 months building that. We spent our entire seed round building that messenger app. We launched it and very quickly saw that no one cared, right? Like people had enough messengers. There was WhatsApp, Viber, Telegram, so many things that their friends were already on, and they didn't need another one just because it was Filipino. And it was, it was discouraging, honestly. We believed in and had been excited about building and launching this messenger app. Very quickly, the market told us that wasn't gonna work, and that was a failure. And we took a look at the data, we dug in, and what we saw when we looked at our most active kind of cohorts and users was that there were these 30, 40 people who had access to this live streaming feature, that was kind of buried in the background. It was only accessible to a small amount of users, but it was through that live streaming feature that these users are really starting to find something worth staying for, and where they were able to build communities, build connections that they couldn't really find anywhere else. So we pivoted to that. In August 2018, we relaunched as a live streaming app, still at the time focused on the live stream game show model. October 2018, we launched what's now our core feature and our core business model, which is the live stream virtual gifts, where as a user, if you like a creator, you like what they have to say, you can send a halo halo, which costs a bit less than $1, or you can send a Malacanang, which is about 2,500 pesos, or an Ibong Adarna, the full screen mythical bird that's about 5,000 pesos, and the streamer gets a cut of that. And that became kind of the loop where streamers would come in, they create content, users would come in, they connect with these streamers, they'd send these virtual gifts, and those streamers would actually eventually be able to make a full-time income off of these virtual gifts. And that just kind of got the growth loop going. In end of 2018, we closed our seed round with Summit Media as our earliest institutional backer in the Philippines. In beginning of 2020, right before the pandemic, we closed our Series A. We wanted to close our Series A, in 6 months after our seed. We ended up closing it almost 3 years after. But OpenSpace led that, and OpenSpace was a really inspiring supporter for us because of how they had backed Gojek when it was just a call center transitioning into becoming the super app that it's known for now. And then earlier this year, we closed our Series B, which was co-led by SIG, one of the earliest backer of what's now ByteDance, which owns TikTok. And just recently, our Series C round announced, I think last month, led by General Atlantic, one of the oldest and largest growth equity funds in the world. Really, with this belief in, even just within the Philippines, how large that opportunity is to be able to build a social entertainment platform for the Filipino people. And when we look back at all of that, it's not just, I think that the fundraisers are just really at the end of the day just financing events, right? And what's more important are things like the fact that 10,000 plus people are earning a part-time income, 1,500 people are earning the equivalent of a full-time income each month, mostly in the Philippines. Globally, we've been called the Disneyland of social media, and that's because of this moderation force that we have. We have a full-time community team of over 100 people in the Philippines recruited directly from our power user base. And we've had, one of the funnier metrics, but metrics we always look at too, is we've had 6 people get Kumu tattoos, right? Because of how much they love the community and how much they've been able to really find a family and people who understand them, and a place where they can really be themselves and be accepted in a way that, again, they just can't really find anywhere else in a social media landscape that's becoming increasingly, toxic, superficial, having as powerful as they are, also having these side effects that are being felt all around the world. And all of that, brings us to where we are now, right? And not just with Kumu, but the ecosystem as a whole, and the sense that the tide is really starting to shift. I think the first thing that I want to, make sure that we say is that the Philippines has always been a large and exciting market. We have 100 million people, and then the 10 million people who are based abroad. Their GDP per capita in their respective countries where they live, if you multiply that by the number of Filipinos in those countries, it's almost a whole second market, or it's just as large as the domestic Philippine market. So the kind of Filipino opportunity, we've always said, is understated by at least a factor of 2. Or just the global Filipino community extends how much of a market there is of Filipinos around the world. What people are starting to, I think investors are starting to wake up to, is the fact that yes, this is an important market and a very large market, and one that's both at the domestic and the global level is something where you can have significant returns. What's been kind of just as exciting for us is that it's not just investors, but tech talent too, who are becoming interested and realizing that they want to place their bets on the Philippines. And just in the past year, we had Crystal Wijaya, who was the head of growth for several years at Gojek. She joined us as our chief product officer. She's Indonesian, no Filipino blood, but just really got excited about the opportunity of building this with us in the Philippines. Alex Sharing, who's our new chief of growth, is American with Tibetan blood and Tibetan and Nepali blood. And he's somebody who also, he was in the US. He helped build a company called Figs that IPO'd in the New York Stock Exchange earlier this year for $5 billion. He was brought to the Philippines by this opportunity to build Kumu with us. And our new CTO, Prakash, was somebody who led one of the core tech teams at Grab, one of the key tech people for customer engineering in Google. He's currently based in India, spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, also felt that the Philippines was an exciting enough opportunity to kind of stake the next few years of his career and his life. And at the ground level, all of that is just testament to the important work that's been done by innovators on the ground. The foundations of this moment were built 3 to 5 years ago, right? Kumu, we really started building about 4 years ago. And a lot of the companies that you're seeing gain momentum now and that you're going to see gain momentum in the next few years are companies that have been just hard at work over the past 4 or 5 years. And I think that's, at the micro level, that's a really important piece of what's driving it. At the macro level, there are these other forces. Of one, you're seeing C, Grab, GoTo are showing what a consumer internet company at scale in Southeast Asia look like. And people are realizing, not just in the region, but around the world, that they want to be a part of that next wave of where that story is going to lead. Two, I think there's this broader uncertainty and forces of change happening in markets like China and India, where investors have been investing a lot of their money in the past few years. And I think one is just as those markets are maturing, there's less of the kind of fundamental bets to put money into, and two, the kind of political forces around it are making investors start to look, who are still interested in Asia, start to look outside the kind of usual suspects of China and India. And three, there's kind of this broader trend of these late stage global firms moving upstream. A lot of the people in venture capital and private equity around the world are talking about how Tiger Global has really went from very not involved in venture capital to one of the biggest and the most active venture funds this year. General Atlantic, who led our Series C, was a company that a firm that had prioritized mostly series, even pre-IPO rounds, right? So they even Series C was a bit early for them. They've started to kind of move upstream, and lots of these larger private equity and growth funds are really starting to look earlier because they want to be a part of the story of the next large consumer internet companies earlier on. So they can reserve their seats in the ride, and they can add value, right, from what they've seen work at these companies at scale. How do they cross-pollinate that into these ventures that are just starting now but have a lot of potential? The other thing that I just want to also touch on, which is really exciting and important for us, is this paradigm of these former entrepreneurs reinvesting in the ecosystem. And I think that's one where that's still very early. And I think the biggest bottleneck to that, as I'll kind of touch on later, is just the fact that there haven't been a lot of major bets yet being built and having successful exits in the Philippines. But you are seeing, Foxmont, which was a supporter investor in our seed round. That was one of the first investors of Grab, the first country manager of Grab, two entrepreneurs who had a significant semi-exit with a kind of co-living concept. All kind of operators who had built a venture from the ground up, and now they're reinvesting the money that they made in that process back into the next generation of entrepreneurs, which is exciting, not just from the perspective of more capital, but also from the perspective of that wisdom being recycled. Foxmont is the one that's really supported us kind of in that vein. You're also starting to see now these other groups of people from Zalora, for example, who are starting their own funds and venture studios and supporting the next generation of startups coming out of the Philippines. And all of that just that sets the scene, right, of where we are now. The sense that there's like a dam that's about to burst, and just records being broken. Several times a year to soon, hopefully every month and several times a month. And I wanted to kind of take that and, in the context of this week, just start to take that into this question of what are we called to do, and what responsibility is on us as a startup ecosystem, as a Filipino nation, to make the most out of this opportunity, right? And make sure that it's not something that fizzles out, but actually something that sets the foundation for the future of really the country as a whole. I think the first thing is really, supporting the early stage. As much as there is a lot more capital now and a lot of money looking for startups to fund, I think there's still not enough in that pre-product market fit stage, where you're still testing things every day, every month. It can take you anywhere from 3 months to 3 years to get that breakthrough that you need to be able to get traction around a business model that works, right? For us, we spent almost 3 years in that stage, where we were running out of money every month, where we didn't know whether the business model that we were focusing on was going to be the right business model, and it was just really a lot of experimentation, and it's just hard to convince the more Series A, Series B, Series C investors to take a gamble on this thing, because it wasn't clear yet. It wasn't clear enough that you could project it out. So I think there's a lot of support that needs to happen at this stage, and that's both in the sense of angels, early stage funds. I think we need more Foxmonts. I think Foxmont is still one of the few independent venture capital firms that are around, that's not tied to a conglomerate. And then the conglomerate ones, like Summit Media, as part of the Gokong Wei family, has been a huge supporter of us from the beginning. I think we need more of those types of people who have industry relationships, have capital to invest, and are able to work with the founders as friendly parties, right? Rather than not being predatory, but really creating terms that make sense for the company in the long term. For us at Kumu, I think a lot of that is just this ethos of open door mentoring. We're always, I think we don't know that much still, right? I think we don't want to presume that we're mentors to people. I think we just have an open door policy on people who want to connect and share insights and get help about particular things that we've dealt with in the past. But I think that's something that actually from an early stage entrepreneur perspective, I think that's something I would urge you to do, is just be more less embarrassed to reach out to other entrepreneurs who you might look up to, because more often than not, you'll see that they're very open to support. On that early stage note, we're also, I'm calling from what we call Sinigang Valley, this neighborhood in Poblacion that we're kind of slowly turning into a hub for tech startups, and through different ways, not just making it like a home for Kumu, but also thinking about how we can make this a place where earlier stage entrepreneurs can meet each other, and also meet people from the ecosystem who could be funders, who could be advisors, who could be key hires. So that's one, is just that supporting the early stage where there's never really enough support, where it's really the hardest part of building a venture, and we just need more people supporting. The second thing is this idea of rallying around our winners. One of the biggest mental barriers to investors globally, and even in the Philippines, is the fact that there hasn't been an exit at the scale of $1 billion in the Philippines yet. And I think that just makes it, at the international level, makes people wonder whether it's worth spending time on the Philippines. At the local level, I think it leads to some of these more less founder friendly terms and valuations, because they don't feel like this is something they have to be a part of, versus something that where they have the power, or the power is in the investors' hands versus the company. So the sooner we can get a big win out of the Philippines, no matter what company that is, the easier the life of really everybody gets. And for the Philippines as a whole, we need to support our champions from all fronts, as consumers, as partners, as mentors, as employees, as regulators. All that takes is really just that one massive win to change the narrative at the global level. And tied to that, my last point is just this kind of call to action for all of us to push ourselves to think bigger. I think we're at this point in time where historical ceilings don't really mean anything, right? A few days ago, I was on a panel with two other startups who raised a Series B or C in the Philippines. Last year, the size of that cohort was 0. And then suddenly there were 3, and then I think there's going to be a lot more later this year. We were the first, I think, Series C that was announced by an independent startup. I think I'm hearing about some others that will probably be announced in the next coming days or in the next coming weeks. And I think that's just going to continue to be the case. I think ceilings are going to be broken. And I think we shouldn't be holding ourselves back with this idea that this hasn't been done before. For us, our valuations are higher than any past exit in the Philippines, but if we're being honest, they're still pretty low by global standards. And so we just need to kind of push ourselves to open our eyes to and build conviction around the possibility that some of the largest some of the largest companies, not just in the Philippines, but in the world as a whole, will come from the Filipino tech startup ecosystem that we're building today. So yeah, excited for all of us to work together and just seize that moment. I think this is a really important time, and I think the conversations that we're having here this week will hopefully form the foundations of us building a greater Philippines together. So thanks, everyone. Thank you for having me, and enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you, Rexy, for that enlightening and inspiring speech. The potential of Filipino startups really is limitless with a supportive ecosystem. How has the ecosystem been doing this year? To give us a look into the Philippine investing landscape, we have from Core Capital, Mr. Carlo Delantar. Carlo Delantar is a founding partner of Core Capital, which invests in the next generation of the Philippines' most promising startups. As the head of circular economy at Gobi Partners, Carlo leads investments in innovative companies championing sustainability. Previously, as an award-winning social entrepreneur, Carlos worked as a country director of Waves for Water Philippines, a nonprofit providing access to clean water impacted 1 million Filipinos. Carlo is currently a circular economy pioneer at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and was the co-chair of the Global Shapers Climate Action Steering Committee at the World Economic Forum. Let us give a warm welcome to Mr. Delantar.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for tuning in and welcome to my opening keynote. We're going to be talking about the investment landscape in the Philippines. I'm super thankful for giving us, the Gobi Core Philippine Fund, this opportunity to talk about the report. This is our service towards the ecosystem. We realize the past few years, it's been a very challenging time for the Philippines. And if we were looking for a sign of optimism and what could happen in the future, this is the sign. I want to start with an anecdote. The past few years, we've had a crazy pandemic. But during this time also, we've created a new paradigm shift. We wake up, we don't go to work via vehicles anymore. We do everything at home. We rely on the internet to get our essentials, financial services, our products, and services. And for me, this is a true sign of that digital acceleration we've all been yearning for. So the time is now, and I'd like to talk to you about what we saw, at least in our findings, the past 4 years. So I want to start with the premise of saying that in the ASEAN, we are definitely the second largest in terms of population. However, in terms of GDP and GMV, we fall behind from the rest. But that doesn't really paint most of the picture, right? Last 2019, or at least from 2014 to 2019, you could see that the funds raised or funds channeled into the Philippine tech ecosystem was floating around 2%. One, mainly because we do have competitive neighbors, but also we have to admit, maybe it wasn't our time. We needed some aspects of the ecosystem to work, and everybody knows this. The interesting part now is to see that the Philippines is really a hospitable space for startups. We're English speaking, we're a matriarchal country. We believe in working hard, being resilient. We're very hospitable towards our neighbors, but also when we do work, we do the best work ever possible. And interestingly enough, we are actually high on the list when we talk about consumption, right? 90%. And this really tells us, especially founders, that there's an opportunity. And the question is, when do we jump in? Over the past few years, I and the GoBeCore Philippine Fund, we've met and mapped over 700 startups. And what's interesting to see is the maturity of the startups has gotten better. But also for 2021, definitely a banner year for the Philippine tech ecosystem. And this really shows that digital acceleration we've been waiting for. To paint it easily, visually, you can see in the slides, year to date, and we're not even done with 2021. We might possibly exceed the $1 billion mark of funds invested towards the startup ecosystem. That's almost more than the past 4 years combined. And this is a really, really important metric because it shows promise and the probably first inflection point that we've been waiting for is here. And it will remain to stay for the years to come. Of course, we also have to realize that during this pandemic, we rely on the internet. Without the internet, a lot of things would not been possible at this moment. Everything could have been way more dangerous if we didn't have the internet. But also the infrastructure started ramping up. Last week, we saw internet speeds being bumped up again by telco providers and ISPs, mainly because of the strict but also very competitive nature of the space. It's good for the consumers, but also good for the startups. Then we talk about all the transactions happening financially, and you get to see the growth that's happening. Not to mention the amount of unbanked actually getting bank accounts because it's so easy and how the government helped with that situation. Now, of course, we talk about those numbers. At the end of the day, what are our indicators? For us, our indicator has always been the iron triangle. Now, the iron triangle is an indicator if a tech ecosystem is starting to thrive. And we need all these three pillars to actually be formidable. One, to create that digital economy for everyone to have access and convenience, but at the same time, for new startups and industries, finding new opportunities from what's been built with the iron triangle. So of course, that's e-commerce, finance or fintech, and of course, logistics. All three of these are very essential part. I'm sure you've added to cart already. I'm sure you've used money transfers. Without that, it's really hard to get our ayuda, especially for our fellow countrymen. Of course, logistics, delivery of products and services, whether that's online or tangible, logistics is very important. With an archipelagic nation, there's a lot of opportunity because we do have non-metro cities and economies that we have to thrive as well. And this is a very important thing. I could confidently say that we have at least started the most important part of the iron triangle being fortified, and it's already happening. Of course, for everyone that doesn't know yet, this year has been a record-breaking banner year. First off, this is the first year ever in the history of the tech ecosystem to see a Series B round. This is very, very important because it shows that the ecosystem is ready for the growth stage of a digital economy. Outside of that, of course, surprisingly but also confidently, Kumu raised their Series C. Congratulations, Kumu. And it shows the direct promise of what the iron triangle can actually provide for the other opportunities outside of it. Now, of course, for us, during this pandemic, we've been an advocate for fundamentals. we need to remember that the Philippines, we have so many other factors involved in order to create a healthy tech ecosystem. Talent, technology, the right consumer base, and so on. And we realize that in order to actually have a sustainable startup ecosystem, we need to think the fundamentals. And it's very, very important that we talk about camels. Camels are pretty much resilient, cautious, committed, and customer focused. A lot of startups and even just SMEs during this time had to rely on the iron triangle to survive. And this is the best way we've seen that in order for the ecosystem to grow further, the mindset of being a camel could lead anyone towards a sustainable startup, business, or even possibly it could become a unicorn. Who knows? But all these factors add up for success for the tech ecosystem, for the public, private sector, and even just startup founders. We won't stop there, of course. We also have to remember that what we saw, we were super proud of as a patriarchal country, is that over the past 5 years, the ratio of female founders to male founders started as 1:5, now is about 1:2. Shout out to the women co-founders. It's definitely time, and data shows that women co-founders are probably one of the best indicators of a thriving startup or even just a company because of their nature to do business. Now, I'm gonna wrap up by saying we've talked about the situation pre-pandemic, the indicators that might happen over the next period of time, what's exciting, what's coming out, but also we have to think about what's gonna happen next. We're going to go towards the fourth generation of startups in the Philippines, and we're already seeing new promises, but that's a different conversation to begin with. But I guess in terms of industry to watch, entertainment is definitely strong nowadays, and it will remain strong for a long period of time. And we also have to acknowledge that the Philippines has a strong crypto blockchain industry. Play to earn has helped a lot of Filipinos thrive during this time. But also, we have great developers that are doing a job well done, and they have accumulated and also thrive throughout the past 5, 6 years even. So please do check out what's happening there. More industries are coming out, especially as the Iron Triangle starts expanding bigger. You'll see more models and opportunities that come out of that. That ends my keynote. Really appreciate everyone's time. If you'd like to read more of our comprehensive report of what's happened over the past few years, I hope you do watch and read up on what we have. There's a lot for everyone to take in. And hopefully, whether you're an investor, startup founder, politician, or officer that is looking into this ecosystem, it's going to be the future. Thank you so much. And again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and happy Philippine Startup Week.
Thank you so much, Carlo, for your informative presentation. It is inspiring to know that despite the pandemic, Filipino startups are continuing to excel and grow. Times and circumstances have forced us to change the way we do things. There is constant development and an unending supply of innovative ideas. With the resources that we have at our disposal, such as logistical undertakings becoming more manageable, e-commerce being considered as a norm, and fintech now easily accessible, we truly are at the stage of digital acceleration. It is imperative that startups take advantage of this momentum and trend, and to foster this ecosystem, resilience is key, accompanied by a collaborative network between various stakeholders such as investors, the consumer, and of course, our brave entrepreneurs and founders. As we close today's conference, we want to end with a high note and celebrate other wins of the ecosystem. For this, you will have a panel discussion about best fundraising news in 2021. For this panel, we will be hearing from Ms. Kimberly Yao of Cloud Eats, Mr. Stefano Pazzini of Metromart, from Mr. Raymond Rollan of Grocery, Mr. Steve C. of Great Deals, and Mr. Paolo Azola of Paymaya. We'd also like to call back Mr. Carlo Delantar from Core Capital to moderate this discussion. This is going to be a jam-packed discussion, as I'm sure the founders have a lot to share about their recent wins. We don't want to keep you waiting, so let's get this panel rolling.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us for this amazing panel titled Biggest Fundraising News in 2021. Of course, why? You'll definitely know why after I introduce the panel speakers. I think this is very apt because this year is definitely a banner year for the Philippine ecosystem. And today we'll be joining by some great speakers. Surprisingly, I did my calculations. They contribute to 30% of all the funds raised for 2021. That's something to be proud of, but also something we can all learn from during this panel session. So joining me on stage is Raymond Roland of Grocery. ER is the co-founder and CEO of Grocery. Having worked in Singapore for Procter & Gamble, Boston Consulting Group, and Unilever, he has vast professional experience in dealing with various retail distribution channels, as well as the sari-sari store distribution channel, due to a personal knowledge of the integral role sari-sari stores play in Philippine retail, national economy, and society. He recognized the potential of transforming the sari-sari store to not only help fast-moving consumer goods companies better distribute their products and services, but also to uplift the lives of the store owners and the communities they serve. Next, we have Paulo of Paymaya. Paulo leads Paymaya in forging strategic, financial, and operational partnerships with global financial services and technology companies, among other sectors. He previously served as Chief Operating Officer and Managing Director of Paymaya, helping to grow the company from inception to its position as the digital financial services leader in the Philippines. Up next, we have Steve C. of Great Deals. Steve is the CEO and founder of Great Deals E-commerce Corporation. Great Deals is the leading e-distributor in the Philippines, catering multinational brands, and was included in the Tech in Asia list of 50 rising startups in Southeast Asia. Considered an industry disruptor, Steve is also the co-founder of Shoppertainment Live, Zagana, and Stratquad. He is an Alibaba Business School e-founder fellow and was voted as one of the top 100 Filipinos to follow on LinkedIn for inspiration and e-learning. Up next, Stefano of Metromart. Stefano is the co-founder and CEO of Metromart, the #1 online grocery delivery service in the Philippines, with partners including Robinson Supermarket, SNR Supermarket, and Rustan's Marketplace. Previously, he also served a mentor and startup at 500 Startups, a venture capital firm on a mission to discover and back the world's most talented entrepreneurs, help them create successful companies at scale, and build thriving global ecosystems. Last but not the least, of course, we have Kimberly Yao of Cloud Eats. Kimberly, or Kim, is co-founder of Cloud Eats, a pioneer cloud restaurant startup launched in Manila in 2019 and expanding across Southeast Asia, beginning with Vietnam this year. She has over 10 years of experience in F&B hospitality and e-commerce, and now has a mission of innovating food service through technology. Welcome, everyone. Kumusta? Hope everyone's doing good. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Carlo.
Thanks for having us here, Carlo.
Yeah, I
Hi,
guess.
everyone. Good day.
Hi. Yeah.
Very happy
Hi.
to be part of the panel.
Perfect. The funny part here for everyone listening, I did my calculation, and this is pretty much 30% of the whole funds this year. I think we have a lot to talk about. The triumphs, the learnings, the insights for post-pandemic year. And I'll start with, I guess, with e-commerce pretty much, right? So if I could bring in Steve and Stefano to talk about, the e-commerce industry. Right now, it's definitely boomed during the pandemic, and it's showing lots of potential. As more and more businesses turn to the internet to reach their customers, what would you guys say is the future of e-commerce, and what role do your startups play in this?
Okay, maybe I could start. No? So e-commerce is really, the pandemic is an inflection point for the e-commerce in the Philippines. As you know, e-commerce is still in the sunrise industry, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities coming in the next 5 years. Especially, we have a very internet savvy, uh, population for the Philippines. No? And one thing for great deals, we're here to help brands and retailers, to transition to go to an e-commerce channel. No? So we're here to help them, assist them, and enable them to digitalize their e-commerce channel going into the future. So we're really looking forward to a more robust, exponential, accelerated growth for the e-commerce industry in the coming years.
Thanks to you,
Okay.
ER.
Okay, so yeah, sorry, I think that was ER or myself.
Oh yeah, that's Stefano. Sorry.
Okay, I think the names were a bit confused. Yeah, I mean, just extending on what Steve mentioned about the post-COVID world, I think there's definitely upward trajectory in terms of consumer habits shifting online, and a majority of this has actually been triggered by COVID because of the fact that COVID has fast-tracked that transition. And so, I believe the future in e-commerce can touch on various aspects, not just simply in marketplaces where we operate. But speaking of Metromart and the areas that we focus on, digitizing the retail stores is really our goal, to ensure that retail stores essentially can have their own storefront within the Metromart app. But not only that, tapping into the technology, the logistics, marketing expertise that Metromart can essentially offer as a marketplace. That's something I think that retailers should essentially look into, and a place essentially where we can help dramatically.
Perfect segue for the next question for both Steve and Stefano is the question on the Iron Triangle, right? The Iron Triangle for a thriving digital economy is having strong logistics, fintech, and e-commerce industries. With your perspectives from e-commerce, what do you think are needed improvements in logistics and fintech to have a strong digital economic foundation?
Okay, so maybe I could. Yes, definitely. For us, we call it the golden triangle, no, because that's why one of our partners is a logistic company, Fast, and it will help us accelerate our capabilities in terms of warehousing, fulfillment, and bottom line to be able to deliver, to the nationwide the products faster and more cheaper. As you know, one of our major obstacle in the Philippines is our shipping fees. Because of our 7,100 islands, we need to really have a good supply chain network. And bottom line, logistics will be a vital part of e-commerce. And in terms of fintech naman, which is one part of the triangle, there's a lot of digital fintech companies that are rising up. No? And this would, especially Paymaya's here, so there will be a lot of adaptation. And we have seen the growth of the digital wallet as a use of payments in our e-commerce platform. It has grown dramatically, but still, syempre, majority is still on cash on delivery. But I think it's just a matter of time that more and more Filipinos will be using digital wallets in terms of paying for their e-commerce purchases. So bottom line, at the heart of it is going to be data. Diba? E-commerce, fintech, and logistics, we will need those data for us to be able to move forward and understand more our consumer, our customers. So definitely, yun yung mga challenges that we need to overcome, which is the internet infrastructure sa Pilipinas. Just make it a speed, 50% faster. There'll be more adaptation of our e-commerce space. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So to add to that, I think if you look at the reasons why e-commerce companies really thrive, it really falls down to what I believe are the three pillars, right? Of convenience, assortment, and pricing, right? Obviously, you need the support of the digital infrastructure, right? Like internet connectivity, speed, and so on. But when we talk about logistics, essentially logistics really touches on at least these two aspects of assortment and convenience, right? And so at Metromart, for example, we do 2-hour grocery delivery, which is a very hard, difficult challenge to maneuver. But if you can essentially deliver your promise to customers, whether it's groceries or whatnot, within a very convenient time frame, where the expectation actually is rapidly increasing, right? Consumers usually want more and more every year. So in our case, in logistics, they want things faster and more efficient every year. So that's where we really have to stay on top of our game to essentially ensure that we're improving every year dramatically as to what the customer expectations are, right? In terms of the assortment is very key because of the fact that when you're converting customers to essentially shop online from offline, basically shifting the habits from what they're used to, which is offline. You also need to provide a bigger range of assortment, and so that's how you convince the digital shopper to continuously shop online, right? And that's really part of logistics as well, because how do you actually deliver large quantity of goods? At least in our case for grocery, our customers are essentially shopping a very large basket because we're considered like an online supermarket versus the likes of GrabMart, which is more an online convenience store, right? We can have between 12 to 15,000 SKUs per store on Metromart. Let's say, for example, in a Robinsons branch that customers can shop from. And so essentially we have to figure out logistically how to deliver that range of assortment to the customer within the expected time frame, right? On the fintech side, obviously, fintech is important in the sense that customers want payment options, so they want to be able to pay with their credit card, debit card in a very seamless way. But also they want other options like cash on delivery, right? Not so much during the pandemic, because I guess the pandemic, people are trying to stay away from cash, which is really boosting the digital wallet penetration, right? With the likes of Paymaya and GCash. And so that's something we're also moving fast on to essentially provide these digital wallet payment services to ensure that the customer experience, customer journey is optimized.
And I guess this is a great segue on the question of opportunity, right? We're still in a pandemic. We're looking forward for this to completely just be a thing of a past. And this brings me to a question for Paulo. Paulo, I think the unique thing about Paymaya is your experience in working with government agencies and LGUs in distributing cash aid during this pandemic. What was the process of transitioning LGUs to cashless solutions like? Is this the future of aid, or is this the future of how things are being ran post-pandemic? And in addition, do you see partnerships with the government as something that could be long-term and equitable?
So I think when we work with government, there are two main channels to do so. When I talk about government, I mean national government agencies as well as local government units. It's getting money from government to people and businesses, and it's also getting money from people and businesses back to government in the form of taxes, for example, or license payments and so on. The fun part, or the part that is the least risky, is actually getting money from people and businesses to government, because there are less questions asked on that side. It's a lot more, it's very transparent because it's obviously digital in nature. And it's quite easy for us to pull off because we've been doing this with businesses and government now for 5 or 6 years. The part that tends to have a lot more scrutiny and tends to be a lot more popular with the newspapers is the part where government hands money over to people and to businesses. So in the past, we've worked with the likes of the DSWD, SSS, and a lot of different local government units, including Manila QC and so on, in providing aid to single parents, to people with disabilities, to people who are in need financially, and as well as to businesses. And that is something that obviously requires a lot of work in terms of customization, in terms of preparing a request for proposal, in terms of making sure that we are ready to provide that service. And at the same time, from a commercial perspective, you can't really charge because it's not the right thing to do when you're handing out aid. You can't really charge for doing that service. And therefore, there's a lot of risk and not that much reward from a commercial perspective. Where the reward is that first of all, you're doing something for your country and for your people that you think is extremely important. And that gets a lot of our employees who are in it for the mission extremely excited. And the other big reward is that you're actually educating a portion of the population that really needs an education in financial services and how to build a better life via financial services. So those are the two big upsides, I think, and they're obviously not commercial in nature. Has it been easy to work with government? I'd say the answer is it's been long. It takes a while, partly because it's not our number one muscle, and partly because of the fact that it just takes longer to make sure that everyone is doing things by the book and it's transparent. Is it our favorite type of project? I'd say from a duty perspective, 100%. Our employees, as I said, are extremely happy to support these kind of projects. Commercially, definitely not. It's where we make no money rather than less money.
Thanks, Paolo. On to Kim from Cloud Eats. Kim, pandemic, the hospitality F&B sector got hit hard, and it's definitely an opportunity to see Cloud Kitchen rise. A lot of models that we can explain through another session, but I wanted to ask you this question. Do you think that cloud kitchens have changed consumer behavior in the F&B industry?
That's a really good question, though, Carlo. I think generally consumers are well educated. They know what's good value for money and what's not. So a lot of these cloud kitchens and virtual restaurants really need to focus on creating a lot of value to earn and to keep their customers, right? So because the customer standards are much higher now, that's the challenge for us. No, now I strongly believe that cloud kitchens are greatly impacting and changing food consumption habits for good. There's some statistics that I actually learned quite recently. It's very interesting that Filipinos spend almost 30% of their income on food alone. I think it's because food has such an important role in our culture and family life. And we're generally a cuisine curious population. We like to try new things, basically, no. So instead of going to McDonald's, for example, when you're looking for a burger and fries for 149 pesos, these cloud kitchens are providing casual dining quality food at fast food prices. No, so customers are now demanding better quality at lower prices, which is exactly what e-commerce is about. What we're doing at Cloud Eats and all of the other cloud kitchen models out there, we're just applying this mentality to food service.
Thanks, Kim. And just a real quick comment on the question of what does it feel like, or what's the challenge or burden looking like now that you're the most funded Filipina startup founder?
Or trying to put pressure, Carlo. Yeah. I don't think it's pressure. It's more of a how do I channel this to be an inspiration for other women, right? It's a challenge to be proclaimed as something like this. I mean, I didn't proclaim it. Actually, one of our investors mentioned to us that this was a fact, apparently. So it's very. I hope it becomes an inspiration to others because as a female founder, it's difficult. You get asked questions that I don't think they would ask male founders, for example. But rising above that and being able to actually prove to institutional investors that a woman can lead a large scale startup is for me a great achievement. So I think that's something that would be inspiring to other young women out there.
Thanks, Kim. And this brings me to ER when it comes to impact. When I saw Grocery as part of this. I was super excited. One, I've met ER already. I love the story, but the quest for sari-sari stores, right? We talk about sari-sari stores dominates the whole archipelagic nation, but if we think about it, a lot of startups don't see sari-sari stores as an opportunity. So, ER, I guess we'd love to ask this question. Considering the pandemic, how has Grocery impacted and helped these stores to weather the quarantines and lockdowns?
I think and people might notice, they might not, but sari-sari stores are in a good position to be extremely relevant during the pandemic, because in a situation where you don't really want your neighbors to kind of go far, right? And those who don't order online, for example, sari-sari stores remain to be the most accessible retail point. And so it's not a matter of relevance. It's a matter of their ability to actually live by that expectation or live by that potential. So sari-sari stores as a network is in prime position to be relevant during the pandemic. We're quite blessed and fortunate enough that our business, in a way, helps them kind of survive this pandemic. Not all of them, right? Because of course some of them don't have the capital to kind of just weather through this. But to those stores who have the willpower and the fight to continue, we've actually seen them grow significantly in this pandemic. They've replaced more purchase occasions versus pre-pandemic, right? So versus just your typical cigarette break or maybe a Coca-Cola break, maybe some of your pantry refills are already being done in the sari-sari store context. So giving sari-sari stores an e-commerce platform allows them to expand their assortment. So they're actually there for their communities, so they can kind of serve them. In a way, what's super elegant about sari-sari stores as well is, besides the fact that they have unparalleled proximity within the communities, their business model is so efficient in the sense that they don't have any rent, they don't have any employees, so their operating costs are close to nil. And that makes them extremely resilient, right? So if, let's say, this month I sell only like half of what I sold last month, I don't have any operating cost to cover. So I don't necessarily have to shut down. I may not have the best month, but I'm still there. And this bedrock is actually what super inspires us, right? Because if we're able to really make that connection throughout the entire ecosystem, then we can leverage and maximize the fact that they will continue to be the most accessible point to any Filipino out there. So pandemic has been, we're probably on the more positive side of the pandemic story. And in a way, because I think Steve mentioned it earlier, the Filipinos are quite tech savvy. And that's becoming true and true also for sari-sari store owners, because their age is also getting younger. A lot of them are now second generation store owners. And so they're a lot more savvy with YouTube, Facebook. And that's all you really need. You have 2-3 social media apps, you're probably well versed to handle any other app out there. So it's been quite positive for us.
And then last question for you, ER. Real quick though, on the comments on for your specific business model, it's not something that a lot of founders would even think to touch, right? Because there's a lot of learning curve for your users. I'd love to hear your quick thought on how other startup founders can actually identify these types of solutions.
That's an interesting question, because I guess knowing what I know now, I probably would have, thought twice about getting into this industry because of how executionally heavy it is. But to me, it's simple. This is the only thing I know how to do. Like, my industry experience is FMCG, is kind of this type of industry, and that's why the idea became investable, because I had credibility in this particular territory. So I guess if you're trying to start up or open a new business, it really makes sense to start with an industry that you have some level of mastery on, some level of 10,000 hours kind of application on, right? And for us, fortunately or unfortunately, it was this messy, chaotic, sari store distribute and trade. So the only thing we can really do is to keep our focus and try to just be better, 1% improvement every day. But the good thing about it is, as you go through those pains, and I'm sure all of our panelists can agree to it, you're also building, in a way, a moat around your business, because you're creating more barriers to entry because of new capabilities and new infrastructure that you're building. That will take someone else a little bit longer to crack as well, given the same time. But who knows? The capital market is opening up. People may kind of buy their way into these sorts of models, but it keeps us on our toes, and we just need to make sure that we're ahead of everyone else.
Stars of their own industries. Thank you so much, Kim and ER, for joining us. This brings us to the fireside chat with everyone involved. For anyone that wants to have a thought on the questions, please feel free to do so. We'll keep it brief so we get more insights on the table. So I guess we can start with the question at hand, right? Biggest fundraising news. You guys are definitely one of them. Through the GoBeCore Philippine Fund Ecosystem Report launched this week, we actually saw and calculated that this year alone exceeds the total amount of funds raised from the past 4 years. How do you guys feel about that? I'd love to hear your comments on that.
I'm going to start, if that's okay. I see ER has just unmuted himself, so I'll give you the floor right after. What I like about this year's funding is that, to me, it's not concentrated within a single company or just one or two companies. It's very widespread. And I think for the first year in history, we are seeing a movement towards the Philippines rather than towards the previous recipients of money. 10 years ago, everybody was interested in investing their money in China. That moved over to India. When the valuations in India started to not make much sense anymore, people started to look at Southeast Asia. And the first big animal out there in Southeast Asia, of course, is Indonesia. Singapore also attracted quite a lot of capital because that's just where the pools of money are. But the Philippines was always left behind when it came to broad-based funding for a lot of startups. This is, I think, is the turning point for that. And obviously, it makes it extremely exciting to be in the Philippines and to be building a business here, because if there are more great deals, Metromarts, Cloud Eats, Groceries, then it means that for a company like us, of course, whether it's on the digital wallet or on the digital bank side, there's a lot more business to be had. So we're only happy when the rest of this panel actually gets a lot of money to invest in their business.
Yep. No, I mean, if I could just add to what Paolo's saying, I think it's extremely energizing from the perspective that we all know the Philippines is a huge market in the region, right? But somehow it doesn't get the same sort of support from the capital markets in the past. And so it's good to see that these ideas and these businesses are getting funded and kind of getting the valuation that kind of matches the traction that they're able to build in a big enough market like the Philippines. So hopefully that continues, and we do want to see more entrepreneurs benefit from this trend. I do have to say that because the Philippine entrepreneurial or startup ecosystem has been starved, quote unquote, with capital, there's a lot more discipline in terms of how Philippine entrepreneurs would tend to do things. We're a little bit more responsible about how we spend, how to deploy capital, and even culturally as Filipinos, we're not the type of people who just kind of, spend irresponsibly. So I think it's working on our favor as well, and that kind of foreign investors are seeing that we do take care of our word, of our prudence in spending, and of our overall being a bit more responsible. So I'm really glad to see this, and I think that to Paolo's point, because the funding is happening on virtually every industry, I think the country is going to benefit from that as well, if this trend continues.
Maybe to echo what Paulo and ER has said, yeah, the Philippines was always left behind. And also, I guess on a personal note, women led startups were also left behind, right? So, this traction for funding in the Philippines and for female founders at that is really a true testament to the quality of talent and ideas that are coming out of this country. And yeah, I think this is just the beginning.
Very well said.
Okay. No, sorry. Go ahead.
Go, Stefano, go.
No, okay. I thought I guess everyone would be able to answer here, but yeah, I agree with what Kim, ER, and Paulo said. In the past few years, it's been very difficult to fundraise, but I guess in 2019, 2020, and 2021, I guess more on the latter years that I mentioned, it's becoming easier, but it's not easy. But what would really suggest the viewers to also partake on in this topic about fundraising is not to immediately upon putting up your startup to fundraise, right? Because that's not a solution, right? I think it's really to focus on the the unit economics, the actual business model to ensure you can actually build something sustainable and hopefully even profitable, right? Raising money is good. It provides you a lot of resources to do what you need. But I guess if you don't have the business model in place and a growth towards or a path towards sustainability, it can become a very tiresome journey, basically, where you're struggling always for the next fundraise and so on. So typically, if you raise your first financing round, really focus on the numbers to try to make it sustainable, and hopefully you don't need to raise a Series B and a Series C. You can stick with your Series A, still own a majority of the company, and that can be an alternative route. So it's not, raising money is not the only solution towards building a successful startup.
Steve, you wanted to say something?
Well, I'm okay. I'm happy. I agree with all of what they have shared, but definitely it's breaking the glass ceiling for the startup ecosystem. And I congratulate everyone in this panel for helping break this glass ceiling that Philippines can be an investable country for VCs and PEs to invest on and grow their funds also. And it is really what's needed in our ecosystem. Alam naman natin dito, the banks will help. You need to have 3 years of of good cash flow and earnings before banks could start giving you credit. So really, there's a lot of opportunities given now to the new founders, and kudos to so many of us here that has broken those glass ceiling to open the doors for other companies, for other startups to inspire and hope to build their dreams. And hopefully we continue to keep on inspiring, keep on challenging our own glass ceilings, so for us to have not just be a Filipino company but a global company, competing at a global level.
Well said, Steve. Down to our last two questions, and of course, the last question is always something inspirational for everybody to bring back. I guess I wanted to use this second to the last question as sort of like thought nuggets for everyone else, right? You guys are definitely right in front of everyone else. You guys are seeing year of the Series Bs, as we say, for 2021. But I guess the next question is really just contributing to the conversation and dialogue for everyone else to take notes of. Is the real question is, now that it's you've gotten your Series B, now what? What are the problems that are gonna come up? What are the challenges? Is there anything that you could tell your past self to get ready? Definitely a few things that we found out in our report is there's a talent gap. The next part is unrelentless competition, regional competition, right? So maybe we could take this this next question as sort of like pulling in what could happen the next few years now that we're almost out of the woods.
Yeah, I think I'll leave that to the rest because I'm not at Series B yet.
Okay, okay, let me share. So I was just talking to my wife. I think this week lang. Sabi ko, Han, I thought when I raised my Series B, I should have less work. Parang as masanay pa akong trabaho ngayon. You know, but well, that's the reality of life. You know, when you're in Series B, it's more of how do you know the challenges. It's more of I think this is more for all entrepreneurs. Okay, after Series B, how do we 10x our company? That's the thinking that we need to have to continue. Hindi ko alam or that's my way of thinking na okay, how do I 10x my company from this point? And that's the inflection point that I would like to challenge everyone. No, in the next 2 to 3 years, how do I 10x and grow it further? What are the things needed, the talents needed, the teams that are needed, the processes, the tech? All of these comes into play. Kasi, syempre, ako, nakiki-millennial na ako sa inyo. No? I might be older in age, but you know, I like to think that I'm still young. But in terms of having the mindset of, you know, how do I 10x my company coming from here? And the beauty of it is if you have the funds already, you have the resources and the responsibility to grow your company and help a lot of other peoples and uplift Filipino lives. So I think that's the next step when you finish the Series B. How do I, you know, continue to grow and make an impact to your generation? Yun lang, yun lang.
Thanks, Steve. I'll take an approach of that is very personal to what I had or what we had to go through, which is, and our Series A was relatively large and came with Series B type investors. So over the last few years, we've gone through some growing pains, and some of the growing pains for us were that being small actually is quite cool sometimes. You know, you move a lot faster. It's a lot easier to get stuff done. You have less rules to abide by. Especially as a financial services company regulated very heavily, the bigger you get, the more, for example, corporate governance becomes an extremely important part of your business. Compliance, of course, and risk management become the most important things that you do. Information security starts becoming, and the way that you handle cybersecurity, the more you become, the larger you become, the more you become a target for everyone out there, especially when you're a financial services company. So there are growing pains that come with it that are not necessarily very fun and that are not necessarily the ones that you thought you'd need to go through to build a large company or a successful company. So it becomes in parts less fun, but at a much larger scale. And therefore, that's the part that effectively we all aspire to get to, is to get to the scale. Unfortunately, it does come with less fun tasks that you need to prepare for and you really need to achieve. So going back to what Stefano was saying earlier, growing up too fast is actually not necessarily a good thing. Being able to grow up stealth and with kind of bootstrapping a little bit more and being able to maintain more equity is actually a great thing if you're able to do that and you're able to build a more sustainable business faster.
I can add to what the guys have said. I think that in the beginning, especially in the very, very beginning, in a way, the founder and the business are one and the same. If that, I'm sure that makes sense to all of you. Like, you know, we do basically, we're the CFO, or we're the CMO, or the COO, or the CTO, CIO, everything, right? As you go through these rounds of investments, there are two proof points, right? One proof point is, can you grow really, 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 really fast? But the second point is, can you actually separate yourself from the business in a way that the business can stand on its own because you have robust enough systems, processes, teams that can kind of multiply the effort of the founders. And I think that's important. And talent becomes a big question, but also your ability to kind of make sustainable standard operating procedures. Of course, to what Paul was saying, compliances, corporate governance. It's there because, when you have, let's say, 5 founders versus 600, 700 employees, it's a very different way of running it. Like, alignment between 5 people is much easier to achieve than kind of 700 people or a couple of thousand people. So making sure that those systems are there are necessary to scale. But similarly, how do you not lose the fact that there is something elegant about being small and being nimble and being agile? And for some of us who have had some corporate experience before becoming an entrepreneur, there are certain stuff that we don't want to carry with us when we start our own businesses, that we kind of were nightmare situations when we were employees. So just taking stock of that helps. But I do think that that's also one of the benefits of having really good investors in your cap table, because they do give you that balanced perspective that you need to make sure that you're getting all sides of the view. It's part of an amazing journey. But to me, that's the question: can you grow super fast, but at the same time, can the company grow without you, in essence, as the founder?
Kim?
Yeah, we're also not in a Series B, but for us, our Series A funding will be partly used to launch a new market. We're in a stage that we want to replicate our model across Southeast Asia. We're actually launching in Ho Chi Minh in a few weeks, and I have to tell you, it's extra challenging to launch a new market in a pandemic. So we had to look at things that we wouldn't normally look at pre-pandemic, such as virtual training programs where the efficient sharing of information between our Philippines and Vietnam teams are more important than ever, right? So hopefully we can travel soon, but it's still a huge challenge to expand in a pandemic. I also get asked this question a lot, no, why expand outside of the Philippines? And my answer is always, why not, right? We have really big dreams for Cloud Eats and a great investor base. So I and the team here want to show the region what Filipino talent can achieve.
And Stefano?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think the moment a startup that completes a fundraise, it comes with a lot of responsibilities, right? And like the rest of the panel mentioned, those responsibilities touch on various parts of the organization, like the talent expansion, as well as marketing. So deploying that capital essentially in every department to essentially meet investor expectations, right? Because ultimately, depending on the terms you have with that investor, there may be certain expectations from them, right? And like with any startup, essentially startups are really built for rapid growth and scale. And so the key is really how do you deploy that capital to achieve that rapid growth and scale, but not to the extent where you're really compromising the ownership of your company, where you're being forced to raise more capital at bad terms, right? Or simply you just don't raise any capital and then you have to shut down, right? So I think the likes of Honest Bee, for example, was a classic example. It was a classic case in Southeast Asia where, they had a lot of capital. It was really deployed towards growth, I guess top line, but not really the bottom line. But eventually when, shit hits the fan, essentially you have to figure out what to do. If you can't raise capital, then eventually you have to either, I guess you have to sell your business, right? Or you have to shut down. So there's definitely a big responsibility, and each founder should essentially not look at raising money and capital as the solution. You really have to look at your books and try to figure out how to make your business sustainable. And hopefully you don't need to raise another round, right? Like I mentioned, building a sustainable, profitable business is out of fashion, I guess, in the startup world. But ultimately, you don't really need to do what's in fashion, right? As an entrepreneur, always thinking about thinking out of the box. So maybe this could be a way to think out of the box, right? I think if you look at some examples like MailChimp recently sold for $12 billion, but they never raised a single dollar. In fact, they they were approached by many venture capital firms or private equity firms, but the founders never raised money up until now, where they eventually sold the entire business and they retained 100%. There was another example, I think, of a BPO essentially that also recently IPO'd in the New York Stock Exchange. The founder had a lot of, there was a lot of temptation to actually raise capital from private equity. Eventually didn't, but did an IPO and he's doing well. So, it comes with responsibilities. So make sure that if you raise capital, you cater to those responsibility expectations from investors, employees, and all the various stakeholders.
With great funding comes great responsibility, as they say, right? And I guess we will talk about the last thoughts here, bearing in mind that the theme for this year's Philippine Startup Week is Filipino startups redefining opportunity. I'd love to hear everyone's last thoughts before we end this panel session.
Well, I'll start off. I think I'm going to try and take a balanced approach by picking something really cool about being here right now and something not so, let's say, not so full of hope. I'll start off with the bad news and then I'll come to the good news. The bad news to me is that if you look at any of the, or a lot of the statistics around how the Philippines is doing worldwide in getting the economy restarted and getting businesses to start working again, getting people back to work and so on, getting our travel industry restarted, for example, which is extremely important at 13% of GDP. I think we probably have a lot of work to be done still. I think I was speaking to a few investment banks this week who were telling me that the 4 years from basically the beginning of the pandemic until 2024, we will be working to get back to where we were in 2020. So 2024 will be back to where we were in 2020. So if you compare that to a lot of other countries that are basically back to where they were already right now, that's a pretty disheartening state of affairs. That said, I do think with the funding coming from outside into the Philippines, that brings a lot of hope for businesses like ours to drive more business for other businesses in the country and to drive more employment and so on, for an opportunity for people here. And if I look at where in 2014, when I arrived in the Philippines, where we were as a startup economy and where we are today in November of 2021, I think we've made a massive leap. And there is no better place to be right now in starting a business than the Philippines. So it's extremely, extremely positive to, or I hope I'm giving a positive message from a startup perspective. Unfortunately, the backdrop from a full economy standpoint still requires a lot of work.
Yep. Okay. Just to add to that, I agree with Paulo. I mean, Philippines, I think, is the best country right now in Southeast Asia to put up a startup, because we're still in the infancy stage. Versus, let's say, I don't think you want to go to Indonesia and put up an e-commerce company there, because you just have a ton of competition with very well-funded businesses, right? Vietnam, pretty much has gotten a lot of attention, and it's also a very good opportunity there. And I think Philippines is pretty much at par with Vietnam, where a lot of the investors, maybe not so much today, but in the next 1, 2, and 3 years, will start refocusing their capital towards the Philippines. And it's not too late to start. I know there's a lot of companies raising money. It's actually the perfect time to start, because when we started in 2016, we actually thought we were a bit late, because you had Lazada, you had Zalora in the market. We didn't really have that level of capital that they did. But in retrospect, essentially, it was the perfect. Well, at least then it was still a good time to start, because of the fact that there's still many different opportunities, segments, areas that you can focus on. They're not being focused on in the Philippines, and just pick the right market with a very big total addressable. Yeah, pick a segment to focus on with a big total addressable market. especially if you want to fundraise, because investors essentially will always ask for that. What is your total addressable market? If your total addressable market is small, good luck fundraising. If your total addressable market is big and you have a good vision and a good team, it'll be easier for you to raise capital. Sorry, I'm gonna have to jump off, but thank you so much for inviting me to the panel, and thanks Paolo, Steve, ER, Kim, and Carlo. Hope to see you guys soon.
Take care, man.
Bye, Stefano.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So maybe I can kind of go next. I think two thoughts for me on this one. I think Paulo's absolutely right in the sense that this entire negative thing, this big change, the chaos that we're experiencing during pandemic, definitely is a tough pill to swallow. But the light at the end of the tunnel is that there's a new order that's gonna come out of this, and as this new order, or I just don't want to use the term new normal anymore. It's so overused, but new opportunities will come up and new business ideas will emerge, right? So and this always happens after some sort of a crisis, like new industries will kind of spur from somewhere. So if you have an idea, it is truly the best time and the right time to kind of do this. And I think secondly, in as much as we talk about fundraising and all of those things, I like what Stefano said about maintaining your own vision. At the end of the day, if it's your business, I think investors will respect your take on it. And in most situations, very few investors that I've met would actually aspire to run your own company. I don't think anyone wants to do that anyway. But sometimes it's terrifying to new founders, like the idea that I have, people will come in, I have to kind of get their approval on certain things. I think it's important for younger founders to make sure that they don't lose sight of what they want to accomplish, what their end state, what their vision, and as long as their execution is solid, I think they'll find that investors and to be in a more collaborative and partnership mode. Of course, there's only situations where it turns sour that everyone tries to panic. But even then, I think just remember that if you get investors, it's because they are investing on your idea and in your ability to execute as well. So take comfort in that. And if anyone wants to kind of get into this space, I wish you all the best. And this network, I'm sure we'll be happy to support you guys in any way, if possible.
Thanks, ER. And I do know Paolo needs to jump off. Paolo, thank you so much for joining our panel. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone else. Bye-bye. Thanks.
See you.
Take care, man.
And Kim.
Yeah, just to wrap it up, I guess I said it earlier, and I think this is just the beginning. There's going to be more and more Filipino startups that will showcase great ideas and amazing talent. We used to be the underdog, I guess. Now I would say we're more a rising star. So I think it's a really great time to build tech-focused companies coming out of the country. But I mean, as a relatively young founder, I think it's still important to say that building a startup is one of the hardest things that you can ever do. It's very difficult. You need a very high level of commitment to get by every single day because every day is different, especially in a hyper growth startup. It's 24/7, 365 days a year. It virtually never ends, right? Like Steve said earlier, you think that after Series B or after you fundraise, you can get to relax more, but I guess not. So maybe some advice is that if you actually jump in with both feet and have commitment to build the startup, don't forget to take care of your team and yourself. Most of all, it's very easy to get lost in the day to day, so there's always something happening. So I think it's important to carve a space out for yourself, some time to switch off. For me personally, I find that the best ideas and strategies always come to me in a moment of silence. So I always remember to give that to myself amidst the craziness.
And Steve.
Yes. So, ang Ang ganda ng mga sinabi nyo. I don't know how to to finish it. But definitely, fundraising is just one part of our business. It's not the be all and end all. Also, on a side note, equity funding is the most expensive of all funding. If you can get a loan, much better. If you can bootstrap it, way much better. No. So for me, it's more of. But if you want to start funding your startup, it's more of, do you have a solution that's being used by your customer base? It's important. It's not about just valuation. I always say it's not just about valuation of the company. It's about, when investor invests in us, will they be able to earn that money, whatever the valuation is. For me, it's, can they get their money back and grow it a few more times? Then it's a good investing company. Most of startups, there are two things. Some of our business are good business, but are not investable business. So if you're going to go to the fundraising route, it needs not just to be a good business, but an investable business. And I think it's okay if it's okay. Sabi ko nga, I was talking to my brother, but it's okay, brother. It's not for everyone to go this route, this company's valuation and all of this fundraising. There are businesses that are good for you, and you can be able to grow it as a, provide financially to your family. So it's not a meaning na if you don't fundraise, you're not good, you're not a great entrepreneur or a great startup founder. No. So sa akin lang, it's how do we impact the people that are in our lives, in our ecosystem. That's the important thing, in life. It's not about how much money this company has raised or this company has raised, but more on how we have become responsible or being a good steward of the resources that was given to us. That's what matters the most. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much. Let's always support Startup Week and the startup ecosystem. Thank you.
Mic drop, Steve. Thank you so much for everyone's thoughts, and especially for everyone listening. It's a perfect way to just end by saying that sometimes fundraising can be both fleeting, flirting, and also exciting at the same time. So hopefully from what you're hearing from this panel, you take that as a way to help you through great wisdom from these panels to actually wade through the opportunities that are coming our way in the Philippines now that we are the must-watch country in the region for startups. And with that, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Have a good morning, have a good afternoon, have a good evening, and for the Philippines. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your insights on how you got to your wins and how we can create more of these successes in the Philippine ecosystem. We all appreciate you taking your time today to share your knowledge with our viewers. As the startup community continues to grow, it is important that we continue to build a strong community and share our wins, challenges, and opportunities with each other. This is what events like Philippine Startup Week hope to do for more Filipinos. That concludes day one. We would like to express our gratitude to our presenters and panelists for contributing to this conference. I hope you're all excited to explore, learn about, and collaborate with the Philippine startup ecosystem. What a day it's been, isn't it? Day one really made us look forward to the coming days. Of course, we are going to have more exciting panelists and speakers for all of you. We're looking forward to seeing you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for another day of sharing knowledge, insights, and wisdom. I am Michael Valera, and this has been the Philippine Startup Week 2021. See you tomorrow for day two.